Hey there, Night Wanderer. Before we begin tonight's story, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe you're in bed or curled up on the couch with a warm blanket, wherever you are. Let the rain outside soothe your thoughts and slow your breath. If you enjoy this quiet corner of the internet, feel free to like the video, and I'd love to know. What time are you listening to this? Drop it in the comments. Are you an early dreamer or a true midnight soul? All right, close your eyes, settle in, and let the story begin. I first came to the tower because I thought silence would help. That's what people say after a loss, isn't it? Take time, get away, clear your head. As if grief were something that dissolves in clean air and pine needles. After my brother passed suddenly, without warning, I didn't want comfort. I didn't want anyone's words. I wanted quiet, something bigger than me, something that wouldn't care if I was hurting. So when I saw the listing for a 3-month seasonal fire watch post in the Klamath Forest, I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask questions. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just packed up, drove north, and disappeared into the trees. The tower was built in 1962. Metal frame, narrow staircase. Perched at the summit of a densely wooded ridge called Hag's Hollow. A name I didn't think much of at the time. From the base of the tower, there's a steep 2-mile climb through thick fir and red pine, most of it without signal. At the top, you're rewarded with a 360-degree view of nothing but green. No houses, no roads, no towns, just undulating forest, stretching forever. I was alone out there, completely. And at first, it felt right. The tower itself was simple, a 14 by 14 foot room encased in old windows, a central rotating firefinder, a radio, and a cot. No electricity, no running water. Supplies had to be packed in weekly by mule, though I was told in the ranger orientation that they'd only come if I called. Otherwise, I'd be left alone. Just me, the trees, and the weather. Exactly what I wanted. The first week passed in a blur of soft wind and heavy sleep. I read books during the day, scrawled notes in a half-hearted journal, and memorized the distant hills like they were constellations. Each ridge and dip had a name: Timber Gulch, Owl's Hook, Widow's Reach. The radio remained mostly silent, except for brief morning check-ins with the district office. Evenings were the best. I'd sit on the catwalk outside the glass walls and watch the fog roll in. The clouds didn't move over the forest the way they do in cities. Here, they drifted through the trees, soft fingers, slow and deliberate. Like the forest was exhaling something thick and thoughtful. I started sleeping better. I thought, maybe this was healing. But then I started noticing the trees. It began on the 12th day. I'd finished dinner, a can of cold beans and stale crackers, and stepped out to breathe the dusk air. A soft mist was gathering at the tree line below. The sun had dipped far enough to paint the sky violet and blue, and I noticed it, a cluster of trees to the north that looked wrong, not unhealthy, not broken, just angled, slightly off, almost like they'd shifted toward the tower, like they were leaning in, listening. I told myself it was nothing, just the way light plays tricks through fog. But the feeling settled deep in my chest like a stone. The next morning, I went to check my firefinder readings and paused. One of the trees near the eastern ridge, a tall ancient pine I'd nicknamed the Spire, wasn't there. It had been the centerpiece of the skyline. I'd even sketched it in my notebook. But now, nothing. No stump, no broken trunk, just an empty patch of canopy. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, checked the firefinder. Still gone. I radioed in, half joking, asking if anyone had logged tree removal on the eastern ridge. Static. Then a voice crackled back. There are no removal operations in that sector. I didn't press, but something small and cold lodged itself behind my ribs. That night, I had the first dream. I was in the tower. Only the glass was gone. Just wooden bones, open to the night. The trees below pulsed in and out of the fog like breathing animals. I felt watched, not from above, from below. A voice whispered, "Don't count the trunks. Count the eyes." I woke before dawn, sweating, heart racing. When I stepped outside, I found pine needles scattered across the catwalk floor. Fresh ones, even though there were no trees within 20 feet of the tower. I began to notice other things. The radio would click on at night, soft static. Never speech, just enough to wake me. My boots, left by the door, would be damp in the morning. Not soaked, just enough to suggest they'd been worn. The journal I kept would have faint impressions between the pages, as if someone had written something, then erased it. I told myself I was sleepwalking. That isolation does things to the brain. But deep down, I knew better. By the end of the third week, I stopped sitting outside at night. The trees were too quiet. The wind had stopped blowing through them. The branches didn't sway. Even during a light rain, the forest remained unnervingly still, as if holding its breath. I began to get the sense that the tower wasn't high enough anymore, that something had gotten taller, that the trees were climbing. I started marking them, just small notches in my notebook, a line for each pine within view. Every morning, I'd count them, and every morning, the number changed. Always more, never fewer, and never the same. That's when I realized the trees could move. I began each morning the same way. Wake up before the mist burned off, count the trees again, and compare them to my notes. The number never matched. Sometimes there were only one or two discrepancies. A pine that had previously stood slightly left of the southern ridgeline was now perfectly centered, or a patch I was sure had been dense the day before suddenly thinned out. But other times, the shift was obvious. Once, a dead tree I'd sketched in detail gnarled, bark split, lightning scarred, vanished completely, replaced by a new trunk that was smooth and wet looking, almost rubbery in texture. It stood a little closer to the base of the tower than the others, closer than anything should have grown in just a day. The forest had stopped making natural sounds. No bird song, no rustling undergrowth, not even the buzz of mosquitoes, only windless quiet. The kind of silence you feel in your ears before a pressure drop. I would hold my breath sometimes, trying to match it, and I'd swear for just a moment I could hear something else underneath, not mechanical, not natural. like low breathing, like the woods were inhaling. I started skipping the nightly check-ins on the radio. At first it was because I didn't want to sound crazy. I couldn't exactly say, "Hey, the trees moved again. Also, they're multiplying." But eventually, I stopped because I was afraid they would answer. Not the rangers. The trees. The static had grown louder. Not brighter, like a storm was coming, but deeper. A low thrum that vibrated in the floorboards of the tower just before dusk. Twice, the radio clicked on by itself. Not to static, but silence, as if someone on the other end had opened their mic and was just breathing, waiting for me to speak. I never did. Around the start of week 4, I tried to descend the tower. I had the thought at 3 a.m. that maybe I just needed to feel soil beneath my boots, ground myself again, literally. So I grabbed my flashlight and made my way down the metal stairs. The forest below was black, but not in a natural way. My light barely pierced it. It was like shining into tar. The trees seemed to absorb the beam. I reached the last step and paused. The forest was wrong. The trunks were closer. The same smooth, rubbery texture. Some of them pulsed faintly, like they were breathing. And I realized I could no longer see the trail that had brought me here. There was no path, just wall after wall of trees, all facing the tower. I climbed back up, faster than I'd ever moved. When I reached the top, I slammed the hatch shut behind me. It thudded harder than it should have, like the tower was no longer hollow, like it had thickened. The next day, the glass fogged up. All at once, I woke to find every pane around the tower covered in condensation. Not from weather. It wasn't cold. The air was still damp. The mist hadn't risen yet. But the fog on the glass was thick, wet, and oddly patterned. I wiped one of the panes clean and found marks beneath it. Fingerprints. Not mine. Dozens of them, smudged and greasy, overlapping like frantic tapping from outside. Only the tower was 30 feet up. I began to dream again. Always the same structure. The tower, stripped of its walls, standing naked in a field of breathing trees. No ground, no sky, just black, and always a voice. You were never alone. Sometimes it came from below, sometimes from inside me. The books I'd brought up to the tower changed, too. Not the content, the covers. Dog-eared novels became journals. Field guides became handwritten entries. I flipped through one and found pages filled with looping black ink. Don't look at them too long. They learn your shape. The more you count, the more they grow. One page, near the end of a yellowed paperback, simply read, "They look like trees," until you remember they aren't. On the 29th day, I lost time. I woke up at sunset, fully dressed, flashlight in hand, journal on the floor. No memory of the day before. When I looked outside, I saw a shape moving among the trunks. Not walking, not slithering, just moving side to side, like it was testing its edges. I didn't shine the light on it. Some part of me knew that if I did, I'd see something I couldn't forget. The final straw came when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Soft, measured, one after another. up the metal spiral that leads to the hatch. I froze. The radio clicked on again, not to static, but to a whisper. "Let us in." I shut off the radio, grabbed the axe from under the cot, waited beside the hatch for hours, but it never opened. When I looked outside again, the trees were closer, pressed against the tower's legs, watching. I've started writing things down in a new journal, not to keep track of them anymore. That's pointless. They grow when I remember. They get closer when I count. But if I stop writing, I think I'll disappear. Not die. Just stop being. Melt into the wood. Become one of the watchers. That's what they want. They don't devour. They collect. They turn you into silence. There are moments just before dawn when the forest turns blue, not the blue of sky or water, but something deeper, like the color of a bruise hidden beneath the skin of the world. It's during these moments I feel the most lucid and the most watched. On the 33rd morning, I realized the sun hadn't risen. The sky lightened. Yes, the mist shifted. But the sun itself, the shape, the warmth, never came over the ridge. There was only a vague brightness, diffuse, flat, like the world had forgotten how to move forward. That same day, I noticed the windows weren't fogging anymore. Instead, they were weeping. Thin lines of moisture ran down the glass from the top, but they came from the inside. I pressed my palm to the pane. It was cool and wet, like skin that had been crying in silence. In the lines of condensation, I saw new symbols, spirals, eyes, a tree drawn upside down, its roots reaching for the sky. I wiped them away. They reappeared an hour later. I stopped using the radio. Even turning the dial made my chest feel tight, like I was tuning into something not meant for me. Once, just before dusk, I heard a voice, not breathing this time, laughter. But it wasn't a human sound. It was too hollow, too slow, like someone mimicking laughter without knowing what it meant. It spoke one word, closer. I unplugged the battery and tossed it down the stairs. It never hit the ground. From then on, things changed quickly. The walls of the tower began pulsing, only slightly, but enough that I noticed it when I sat still for long stretches. A slow in and out flexing, like lungs breathing through the wood grain. At night, I heard movement beneath the floorboards. Not animals, not wind, dragging, like something pulling itself around the base of the tower. Sometimes it scratched, not frantically, rhythmically, like it was carving something in. I tried sleeping during the day, hoping to reset whatever rhythm had broken inside me. But my dreams followed, and they were sharper now. The trees in the dreams no longer looked like trees. They had too many limbs, too many joints. They bent where no living thing should bend, and they watched me. Every dream, I stood at the edge of a vast clearing, and they circled around me. One step forward, its bark split open, and inside was me. Not alive, not breathing, just hung in there, suspended, eyes open, smiling. On day 38, I looked out and saw another tower, identical to mine, across the western ridge. It hadn't been there before. I know the forest. I know every rise and fall, every bend of tree line. There had never been another structure, but now there was. I raised my binoculars. In the window, a figure stood, staring back. They raised their binoculars. We locked eyes, and I understood. It was me. From that point forward, the nights lengthened. The shadows grew thicker. My flashlight dimmed, no matter how fresh the batteries. The oil lamp burned lower than it should. Once, in the middle of the night, I noticed the moonlight had shifted. There were no clouds, no rain, but the light coming through the glass was red, and it flickered like candlelight. I began hearing whispers beneath my own thoughts. Not words exactly, more like memories that weren't mine. Impressions of things I'd never done. A deep voice calling from beneath the roots. The sensation of digging with bare hands. The taste of moss on my tongue. They came to me while I was awake. The journal I kept began filling itself. Blank pages scrawled with notes in my own handwriting. If they learn your name, they keep it. Don't let them remember you. You were never sent here. You grew here. I opened the trap door to the stairs one night, intending to look, just look at what waited below, and I saw something climbing, slowly, silently. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It had the shape of both. Long limbs, bark for skin, no eyes, but it knew me. I felt it in my chest, a thrum, like a name being spoken from inside my own ribs. I shut the hatch. It knocked once, and then left. The books I brought up were all gone now, replaced by blank journals. Hundreds of them, spines facing inward, pages empty until I touched them. Then the writing bloomed like ink bleeding through skin. You are becoming, and the trees, they reached the top of the tower. I don't know when it happened, but I stepped outside one morning and saw branches level with the windows. Thick, dark branches. Still, watching. One of them tapped the glass, slow and steady. I didn't move. The tap continued, then stopped, and something whispered, not with a voice, but with presence. We remember you. On day 43, I opened the hatch again. The forest floor was gone. In its place, roots, tangled, endless, moving slowly like the floor of an ocean. And beneath them, faces, dozens of them, maybe more. Not dead, not alive, just waiting. Some had their eyes open. Others had bark covering their mouths. I saw my brother among them. He didn't blink. I realized then, this wasn't about watching for fire. This tower was not a job. It was a cage. Not for me, but for what sleeps beneath. And I, like the watchers before me, was the last part of the ritual. A sentinel, an offering, a seed. On the 45th morning, I stopped recognizing the tower. The dimensions were wrong. The walls, once 12 paces wide, now took 20 steps to cross. The windows had no seams. The corners curved slightly inward, like I was inside, something that had grown, not something that had been built. And the air was different, heavier, breathing. When I placed my palm against the floor, I could feel a heartbeat, not mine. That day, The tower began to creak, not from wind. There was none. The sound came from within the wood itself, groaning like an old boat on black water. The beams flexed slightly with each pulse, and the metal bolts began to bleed a thin black sap. I wrapped my hands in cloth to avoid touching it, but it didn't help. The cloth soaked through in seconds and started to smoke. It was then I noticed my reflection was no longer mine. Not in the window in the oil lamp glass, in the sheen of a cooking pot, in the mirror I'd avoided since day 15. The thing looking back at me smiled too slowly. Its eyes didn't blink and sync. Its movements were rehearsed, like it had studied me and forgotten a few steps. One night, I moved left. It moved right. I turned all the reflective surfaces toward the walls. It didn't matter. The face began appearing in the wood grain. The knots in the pine walls twisted into eyes. The floorboards curled like lips. And when I laid on the cot, I felt hands underneath me, not touching, but holding, waiting. It was then I remembered something I hadn't allowed myself to consider. I had never met my predecessor, the person I replaced. No handoff, no note, no trace. The tower was stocked when I arrived, neat, ready, almost welcoming. I had been told the last ranger left early, personal reasons. But now, I realized they didn't leave. They were still here. The rain didn't come from the sky anymore. It began falling from the walls. At night, a slow, steady patter soaked the inside of the tower. It wasn't water. It was warm, viscous, clear, but with faint black threads floating inside like veins. I stopped drinking from my bottles. I stopped sleeping. I paced in slow circles, counting the ridges in the walls, listening to the whispers that now filled every silence. And they always said the same thing. You've grown well. One night, I opened the trap door again, and this time, there were stairs beneath it. New ones. Thick wood. Fresh grain, leading down, farther than the tower had ever extended. I don't remember walking, but I found myself descending, step after step, into something that wasn't forest anymore. The walls weren't made of trees. They were made of ribs, huge, arched bones, coated in moss and fungus, pulsing slightly with breath. The staircase spiraled downward for what felt like hours. At the bottom was a door, and etched into it, we remember our roots. I opened the door. There was no handle, only a single notch, the width of a palm. I pressed my hand into it. It fit. The door dissolved into mist. Beyond was the root chamber, a great hollow beneath the forest, where the roots of all the trees met, tangled, coiled, living. The ceiling was lost in blackness. The walls were soft and pulsing. The roots formed a great mass at the center, like a sleeping heart made of bark and memory. I felt it before I saw it. The being, not a god, not a creature, a presence. It didn't speak in words. It didn't move. But I knew it had grown me. Not just me, all of us. The rangers, the watchers, the forest caretakers. We weren't hired. We were bloomed, planted, cultivated, grown like branches in a network of memory and purpose, to watch, to keep it dreaming. The revelation struck me not with terror, but with recognition. This was always the end. The others before me, they were here still. In the roots, their memories fed the system. Their bodies nourished the structure. Their shapes were reused, regrown. I saw them dozens of versions of myself, all standing in the dark, all smiling, all watching me. And in the center, the first, a towering figure of wood and shadow, faceless, covered in bark that shifted like pages of an old book. Its limbs hung like twisted branches. From its chest, a single root connected to the rest, the dream nerve. I understood then. I had been its dream, my grief, my silence, my need to disappear. It had given me all of that. It had become the silence. And now it was time to return. It opened its arms, not like a threat, like a cradle. And I stepped forward, not because I was forced, but because I understood. I had always been part of it. A seed scattered through memory, a root growing upward into thought, a leaf that had forgotten its tree until now. As I stepped into the embrace, I felt my skin change. Not burn, not tear, just soften, stretch, bark in place of breath, silence in place of blood. And I became part of it. Not gone, just remembered. You might be wondering, who's telling this now? That's the strange thing. Memory doesn't end when you become part of something older. It stretches, echoes the way a voice might carry across a canyon. I'm not who I was, but I still remember being him. I remember the Firewatch Tower, the soft hush of pine needles underfoot, the way the fog would roll across the valley like breath from some sleeping thing. Back then, I thought I was escaping something. Now I know I was being called home. The forest is quiet now, not because it's still, but because it listens. The wind that threads through its branches no longer speaks in gusts. It hums, low and constant, like a lullaby. The birds do not sing. The animals do not cry. Everything here is in place, as it was meant to be. And beneath the roots, we all wait. Some of us newly grown, others ancient and folded into the base of things, indistinguishable from the dirt. We do not speak to each other. There is no need. We share the same dream. Above us, the tower still stands. You can't see it unless it wants to be seen. Sometimes a hiker strays too far from the trails. They see the glint of glass high in the trees, or hear a voice, not words, just a rhythm, something that makes them pause and squint toward the ridge. Most turn back. A few don't. We don't stop them. The ones who come closer are often those like I was, quiet souls, already heavy with forgetting. They think they want peace. They think they're chasing solitude. But solitude is never empty. Sometimes it watches. Once every season, someone new arrives. They never remember the hike. They always wake up on the cot, supplies neatly packed, journal half filled already. The forest shifts itself to welcome them, and the tower breathes again. They'll think it's temporary. They'll say it's a break, a way to reset. But eventually, they'll feel it too. The trees don't stay still. The light doesn't fall right. The reflections move when they shouldn't. And the forest will begin whispering, "We remember you. I don't regret it. That might be the strangest part. The deeper I sink, the more I feel. Not as a person, not even as a thought, but as a rhythm, a slow, pulsing tide, the kind that roots follow underground. I know now that this place doesn't devour. It incorporates. We are not lost. We are grown, replanted. Our memories become part of the canopy, our sorrow drawn up through the sap like sugar. Even grief becomes mulch here. Even silence flowers. If you're hearing this, you're already close. Maybe you're sitting in a cabin nearby, the rain soft on your roof, thinking about the quiet. Maybe you found an old radio, and something told you to listen just a little longer. Maybe you've seen the tower, or maybe it's already seen you. Don't be afraid. Not yet. The forest doesn't chase. It waits, and it remembers well. But if you feel the trees leaning, if the trail you walked yesterday is gone today, if you find fresh pine needles on your windowsill, even though you're 3 floors up, then maybe you're being offered something. Not escape, but release. Because in the end, we all return to the roots. And when the tower calls, there's only one question that matters. Do you want to be forgotten, or do you want to belong? I took the job because I thought no one else would. 3 months. Seasonal technician. Infrastructure support. The listing came from a government bulletin, so outdated, it still had a fax number at the bottom. I'd been scrolling for hours, half drunk on resignation and old coffee, looking for something far away and quiet. Water systems technician, Talon Ridge Township, isolated, self-guided, room provided, no resume requested, just willingness to travel. The contract said, limited contact with town residents is expected. It said the system maintains itself, your role is observational. It also said, do not access the base of the water tower unless absolutely necessary. Do not approach the tower after sunset. Do not engage with individuals found near or around the base during prohibited hours. Should you experience memory gaps, audio hallucinations, or changes in visual pattern recognition, report immediately to your log. There was no supervisor's signature at the bottom, just the word issued and a date that was smudged. The drive-in took 7 hours, 2 lanes narrowing to 1, then to gravel, then to nothing but cracked blacktop veined with weeds. The town appeared out of the trees like something someone gave up on halfway through. 1 gas station, 1 diner, a post office that looked nailed shut, and 1 long road leading uphill toward the water tower. It loomed above the pine line, old, rusted in places. A faded red warning stencil near the top read, property of Talon Ridge, do not climb. Beneath it, the service trailer, a rectangular box with 1 cot, 1 desk, a fuse panel, and a portable heater that clicked when it was cold. That was mine. I didn't meet anyone the first night. No welcome call. No curious neighbor. Just a clipboard on the trailer door with my name written in Sharpie, a schedule clipped beneath it, and a weathered manual that looked water damaged. Inside, blank log sheets, 1 for every day of the job. I made my first entry at 7:00 p.m. Quiet, unremarkable. The way I needed things to be. Day 1, no anomalies, No visual changes to tower structure. Air pressure steady. Echo pattern inside base consistent with known parameters. No tone deviations. I didn't know what that last part meant, but the template included it. So I kept writing it. It rained the next 3 nights. Steady, even rain. Good thinking weather. I walked the perimeter of the fence twice a day. Checked the meter dials. Jotted notes. Nothing changed. Except the feeling. The water tower groans. Not constantly, not loudly, but when the wind dies and the rain settles to a mist, you can hear it. A deep, tired creaking from inside the column. The kind of sound a sleeping house makes when it breathes too deep, like steel flexing under the weight of something too old to move anymore, or something pretending not to move. There are no birds near the tower. No insects either. No puddles form around the base, even when it rains. It's dry, too dry, and the pine needles nearest the tower always turn black by morning. I told myself these were all just observations. Unimportant, routine. That's what the log was for. To capture things before they became reasons to worry. On day 7, I heard the first sound. It came from inside the pipe vent, just after midnight. I stepped out of the trailer to check the storm runoff readings, and I heard it, not a creak, not wind, a voice. Low, wordless. It sounded like someone humming underwater, or remembering a lullaby they hadn't sung in a long, long time. I stood there in the rain for a while, listening, not sure if I'd heard it at all. The next morning, the log was already filled out, typed, date and time correct, same phrasing, same format, except one line at the bottom I hadn't added. Do not acknowledge the sound. It was in bold. The manual never mentioned boldface. On day 10, I noticed something strange in the reflection of my trailer window. It was subtle. A figure, half turned, standing near the edge of the tower's shadow, barefoot, still. I spun around. No one there. When I looked back, the reflection was already gone, but the footprints remained, just for a moment. Then they dried. Even though it was still raining, the town hasn't checked in. No emails, no phone calls. The service radio is quiet, and the sky hasn't cleared once. But I still write in the log, because someone keeps reading it. And sometimes adding to it. I don't think I'm alone out here. Not really. But whatever's near the water tower, it doesn't want to hurt me. It just wants to be remembered. The rain stopped on day 11, but the air didn't feel dry. It felt wet from the inside, like I was breathing through cotton or standing in the fog, even though I could see clear across the ridge. I walked the usual perimeter, checked the tower base, took the same notes, but the gravel felt softer than before, like someone had just walked it, barefoot. The humming came again that night. No melody, just a low, wet vibration, like a throat too full of water to make words. This time I didn't go outside. I just lay still on the cot, barely breathing. And that's when I realized it wasn't coming from the tower anymore. It was coming from under the trailer. In the morning, I found a new page in the log binder. It hadn't been there before. The top read, Incident Contingency, Protocol echo. No date, no heading, just 5 lines. If you begin to see things that are not there, continue as normal. If the tower speaks to you, do not respond. If the manual changes, read it only once. If a second version of you appears, avoid eye contact. If it begs for help, write nothing down. I flipped through the manual, slowly, reluctantly. Most of it hadn't changed. But on the final page, someone had scrawled in what looked like pencil, "The water doesn't just store pressure, it stores memory." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I tore the page out, burned it in the stove. But when I opened the manual the next day, it was back. Same sentence, same handwriting. Only this time, it ended with, "Yours too." On day 14, the fog rolled in, heavier than I'd seen it before. It wasn't natural, it didn't drift. It hung, like a ceiling a few feet above my head. I could still see the tower, but only just. Its red dome was blurred and shimmering, like something was swimming beneath its surface. There were no reflections on the wet ground. Even standing in full view of the trailer window, I cast no shadow. That night, I dreamed of the town, but it was empty. No diner, no gas station, just the tower and the sound of dripping water, except the drops were falling upward into its tank. When I woke, my boots were wet, but it hadn't rained, and the door was still locked. I tried the service radio again, just static, until 8 a.m. A voice came through soft, close, my voice, repeating what I'd written in the log the day before, word for word. Then, "Why did you write it down? You weren't supposed to remember this part." Then it cut out. The static remained, but the words hung in the trailer like fog. The reflection returned on day 17. Only this time, I didn't see it in the window. I saw it in the water drum beside the trailer. A small backup tank used for tests. The surface was still, but when I leaned closer, I saw someone staring back. Not exactly me, just close enough. Same face, same scar on the knuckle, but older, wet, and smiling, with its lips closed, like it was keeping a secret I'd already told it once. I don't dream anymore. Now when I sleep, I wait, and the sound keeps changing. The humming is words now, still warped, still wet, but clearer each time. We remember you. We held what you gave us. Come stand at the base, just once. The base of the tower is colder than it should be, even at noon, even in the sun, which I've only seen twice since arriving. The steel is cold enough to sting your fingers, and there's no echo when you speak beneath it. Not even a footstep, like sound won't reflect, like it's being absorbed. I found a photograph in the trailer desk. It wasn't there before. It shows someone standing at the base of the tower, blurry, faded, hard to tell, but it looks like me. Or maybe someone who had the job before me. Or maybe someone who never left. I tried calling the office. Used the emergency contact number. It rang once. Then a click. Then a recording. "Thank you for completing your assignment. Final memory extraction begins at midnight." Do not resist the water. I haven't written anything in the log since then, but the pages keep filling themselves. Same handwriting, same phrasing, but a different sign-off. Now they end with we, not me. I'm not sure when the job ends, or if it ever started, but the tower is watching, and the water isn't still anymore. It ripples now, even when the wind is dead, like something is swimming just beneath the surface, like it's awake. The next morning, I woke up standing outside, not lying in bed, not groggy or mid-dream, just standing, facing the water tower. The sun wasn't up yet. The fog hadn't lifted. My boots were soaked. My hands were wet, not from dew or rain, but from water that smelled of rust and something older, like something sealed too long in iron. The trailer door was still locked from the inside, so I know I didn't walk out, or at least I didn't open anything. Maybe I seeped out. I checked the log first. It was already filled out. Day 22. Observed peripheral shifts in internal weather patterning. Tower tone now modulated. Identity blending successful. Identity blending. I didn't write that. At least, I don't remember writing it. But it was my handwriting. Same as yesterday. Same as the day before. Same as the first day. The tower's tone is changing. It doesn't creak anymore. It sings. A low harmonic vibration that hums through my ribs when I stand too close. Not notes, not music, just intention in sound form. It doesn't ask for anything. It just waits for me to catch up. The sound sensors in the manual, the ones I thought were disconnected, are active again. The monitors light up each night now. I can watch the pulse of the tower's breath in real time. Every few hours it exhales. And when it does, the trees bend toward it. The fog parts, and the reflection appears again. Always still, always watching, not waving, not asking, just acknowledging. The town hasn't returned my calls. I walk the road into town again, past the empty diner, the shuttered gas station, the sagging post office. Everything is still there, but smaller, like I'm growing or it's shrinking, like the scale is changing to match me, or I've started sinking into whatever the tower remembers me as. I don't recognize my own face in the mirror anymore. Not because it's wrong, because it's too right, polished, symmetrical, posed, like someone wearing a mask of me down to the pores. But I've stopped shaving, and yet the reflection hasn't. The humming followed me into the trailer today, not audibly, through the walls. When I touched the table, it thrummed with that same underwater note, the one I only used to hear when I put my ear to the tower's steel. It's closer now, or I'm becoming part of it. Day 25. I woke up to find my journal already open. Pages turned back. Entries filled in ahead of time. Future dates. Future notes. Day 31. You stood inside the water and remembered too much. Day 34. The second version of you stopped resisting. Day 36. Integration achieved. The rest is routine. I burned the journal, but I found it again the next day, untouched, open to a new page. You can't forget something that remembers you back. I finally walked to the base of the tower again. I stood beneath it, felt the tone rise into my spine like a tuning fork in my blood. My teeth hurt. My eyes watered. I whispered, "What do you want?" No reply. But a single drop of water fell from the base pipe onto my forehead. It was warm. That night, the dreams returned. Only they weren't dreams. They were memories. Not mine. Not at first. People I don't know. Voices I've never heard. Standing in this same place. Looking up at this same tower. Whispering different names. But all ending with the same phrase. Let me be stored. The water is no longer clear. I checked the backup tank. It's dark now. Not brown. Not red. Black. But only when I look directly at it. In peripheral vision, it's fine. Colorless. Calm. But when I stare, something moves beneath. And it stares back. The tower is full of faces. I see them now, pressed against the inside of the tank like condensation. Not screaming, just watching. Some are familiar. One wears my expression, and one is smiling too early like it already knows how this ends. I'm not writing this in a log anymore. This is just for me. Or it was. But I know it'll show up in the binder tomorrow, printed clean, signed with my initials. G. L. Cycle 5. I don't know if the tower was always like this, or if we made it this way. Every time we filled it with water, we filled it with ourselves, and it kept what we poured in. Every sigh, every routine, every word we whispered while working, every secret we wanted buried beneath silence. It soaked them up and waited until someone like me came back, until someone who couldn't forget brought enough silence with them to hear what was still in there. The humming is constant now. The town is gone. Or maybe it was never here. Just shadows around the tower to keep it company. Just ghosts of people who signed up to maintain something they never understood. Like me, the job description said, observe. But what it meant was, be seen. It opened on the 31st day. Not with noise. Not with light. Just absence, the sound of nothing, where something used to be. I stepped outside, barefoot, still half dreaming, and the tower's base was open. A hatch that had never been there before. A circular entry, rustless, rimmed with black condensation. It breathed. Not deeply, just enough to let me know it knew I was there. I don't remember deciding to go in, only the feeling of having already done it, and now catching up to that decision in real time. I walked barefoot across the gravel. Didn't feel a thing. The light inside was soft like moonlight underwater, and the air was warm, wet, like the exhale of something thinking quietly. Inside, it wasn't metal. It wasn't structure. It was fluid memory. Thin walls pulsing with images, not like film, not digital, more like oil and water shapes, flickers of faces, fragments of words, the bones of routines long since decayed. I saw myself entering the trailer, sitting at the desk, scratching my initials into the bottom drawer. Only I hadn't done that yet. I touched the wall, It moved. It showed me. The first observer was in 1971, or maybe 1871. There were no dates in the tower, only cycles. She was a hydrologist, sent to monitor an unusual tremor pattern beneath Talon Ridge. The water tower was already there, half-built, half-grown, already humming. She heard the voice, too. She never left. Now she stands on the far side of the tower, folded into the tank's curvature, humming into the steel. The second was a man. His badge said, Grant. He wasn't a tech. He was a runner dropped off to repair a broken pump. Stayed 3 weeks. Stopped speaking after the second. Became part of the pipe system. Literally, his breath flows through the line. If you turn the valve slowly enough, you can hear his laugh and the gurgle. I saw dozens more, each one different, each one the same. Not dying, not vanishing, just kept, filed into the rhythm of the tower like chapters. Names blurred, faces blended. A choir of versions all standing where I stood, watching the shimmer of their old choices play like ripples on the surface of something that can't be stilled. And then the wall showed me my trailer. Not outside, inside the tower. It was part of the structure now. Flesh of routine. Frame of memory. The pages of the log flapped open and shut, without wind. Every word I'd written already pre-written beneath. Including this. Including now. The tower doesn't store water. That was a metaphor we clung to because we needed a reason for it to exist. But this place? It doesn't distribute liquid. It preserves repetition. It remembers every act done in silence and makes it eternal. It held each version of me. Not copies, echoes, thin layered memories, layered like sediment at the bottom of a tank. They moved when I moved, hummed when I hesitated. They weren't hostile. They weren't even aware, just waiting to be the next to act. When one version wears out, the next ripple takes its place. And now, it's my turn. To sit, to listen, to hum softly beneath the floor of a trailer that isn't real anymore. To write words that appear in the log before I think them. To pour a little more of myself into the tank every time I almost remember who I was. The tower's tank is full now, but it's always full. Because memory expands to make room for the next shape, the next self, the next technician who thinks they're here to watch, not realizing they're the ones being recorded. I sat on the floor inside the tower, and it rocked once, like a wave passed through the world, and I knew I was sealed in, not trapped. Archived, part of the system now, a quiet hum in the walls, a reflection in the backup tank, a voice in the log that answers before the new arrival even finishes writing. Welcome. We've been holding this space for you. It's been raining again. Or maybe the tower's just dripping through me. Hard to tell the difference now. Moisture coats every surface, the cot, the floor, even the glass on the meter screen. But nothing ever molds, nothing ever decays. It all just persists, preserved in the rhythm. I don't remember arriving anymore. Only the shape of arrival headlights on gravel, boots on the trailer step, the first breath inside the heavy silence. I don't recall packing. I don't recall what I left behind. Just that I wanted to be forgotten. And the tower gave me that. In exchange for everything else. The logs continue without me. Pages flip. Pens scratch. The handwriting matches mine. But it moves too neatly now. Too fluidly. Like it doesn't need a hand anymore. Just a pattern. There's another cot in the corner now. I didn't place it there, but someone will lie on it soon. Someone new, but not unfamiliar. They'll bring coffee that goes cold too quickly. They'll write the first log entry by hand, even though it's already been typed. They'll hum, softly, without knowing where the melody came from. The reflection still appears, in the backup tank, in the trailer window, in the oil smear on the glass of the relay board. But it doesn't move unless I'm not watching. And sometimes it looks just a bit older than I am. Sometimes a bit younger, like it's practicing, getting ready. At night, I sit by the hatch, the one that only opens when it's ready to show you the inside. And I listen, not to the voice, to the breath. The soft, circular inhale of a structure that doesn't run on electricity or pressure anymore, but remembrance. A tower that contains more selves than water, and still has room for more. I dream gently now, not of escape, of routine. The same walk, the same log, the same whisper. Day one, no anomalies, no visual changes to tower structure. Echo pattern consistent. That line is a door. The more you repeat it, the further in you go, until you realize you're the one the tower is remembering, because you were always here. Sometimes, I wonder what happens if no one comes. If the next version doesn't arrive. If the road washes out, or the contract gets lost in some forgotten inbox. But the tower never worries. It waits. It always waits. Because forgetting is just how the next story starts. And when they do come, they won't know. Not at first. Not until the humming begins. Not until their reflection smiles first. Not until they stand at the base and feel their bones thrum like tuning forks. Then they'll understand, just like I did, that this job was never about watching. It was about being watched, being copied, softly, quietly, layer by layer, until the original forgets and the memory remains. So here I am, still in the trailer, still writing in the log, still checking the same 4 gauges. Only now, I know what I am. I'm what the water tower remembers when no one else is around. I'm its echo. And when you arrive, I'll remember you too. I never thought I'd end up back underground. After I left the department, I swore off tunnels, radios, anything with a hum in it. I moved to a place with wide skies, worked in a greenhouse, talked to real people with real voices. Thought I'd put the old life behind me. But grief doesn't obey promises. When my brother Tom died last winter, something broke in me. I wasn't sleeping, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except his last transmission, one I wasn't supposed to hear. But I did. It came through an old backup receiver in my closet. A broken, dusty thing I hadn't touched in years. All it said was, "Anna, don't go below. It remembers you." Tom had been working a solo shift at a decommissioned transit maintenance hub deep beneath Dry Ridge, a facility I knew well. I helped design its signal grid when I was just starting out, before they shut it down. Before it started responding, they said he had a heart attack. Natural causes. His body was found sitting at his station, headset on, no signs of distress. But I know Tom. He was a runner. Strong, healthy, too young for his heart to just stop, and too smart to be wearing that old headset unless he was trying to hear something. So when the department sent out a quiet contract offer for a temporary tech to monitor the site during the spring thaw, I took it. No fanfare, no name, just initials on a dotted line. That's how I found myself standing outside the rusting gate of Maintenance Hub E19, 3 hours past the last inhabited town, at the bottom of a ravine that never quite loses its snow. There was no welcome party, just cold wind and the crunch of gravel under my boots. The access hatch groaned open like something reluctant, and I stepped down into stale air that hadn't moved in years. Inside, the hub was exactly as I remembered: sterile, steel, humming faintly with leftover power from a solar line that should have been disconnected a decade ago. I signed in with the old code. The lights flickered once, then held. I was alone. The living quarters were cramped but intact. A cot, a kitchenette, some sealed food tins stacked like they'd been placed yesterday. No dust, no spider webs, just a stillness that made me feel like I was trespassing in time. The main command room sat at the end of a long hall lined with thick glass panels. Behind each panel, the maintenance drones sat dormant, like mannequins in shadow, their bulbous heads tilted slightly. Frozen mid-motion, one of them had its arm raised, like it had been waving. I didn't look at them long. Instead, I powered up the comm board and did the first scan. Nothing, just static. I repeated the sweep. Still nothing. Then I lowered the gain slightly, and on channel 4, the old engineering band, I heard it. Click, click, static, click, like something tapping gently on metal. No voice, no code, just intention. I told myself it was interference. Nights passed slow. The rain above ground started the second night and hasn't stopped since, soft at first, now heavier, drumming against the metal ceiling far overhead like a second heartbeat. It helps me sleep, or it should, because sleep has been strange. I keep dreaming of hallways I've never seen. Not in this hub, not anywhere. They're dim, but warm glowing with that awful amber color that old sodium lights give off when they're dying. And in the dreams, I'm always walking. Always towards something I can't quite see. There's a sound behind the walls in the dreams, like breathing, but not steady, more like mimicry, like something trying to remember what breath sounds like. I wake up with my pulse racing, and every time, the lights in the command room are just a little dimmer than before. On the 5th night, I tried to call out, just once. "Tom," I said into the headset, "I'm here." I don't know what I expected. A voice? A warning? Static? But what I got was worse. I heard my own voice, coming back through the line. Same tone, same words, but off by a second. Delayed, like something was listening and learning. "I'm not scared. Not yet. But I've stopped using the headset. I've stopped sweeping channel 4. I've even taped over the comm light so I won't see when it blinks. It's been blinking more often. Maybe the hub's waking up. Maybe it never slept. Either way, I've started keeping this journal. Just in case. I don't know if it'll help anyone, but if something does happen, if I don't make it out, someone needs to know the truth. Tom didn't die of natural causes. He heard something. And now, so do I. The first real shift came on day 7. Not a scream, not a body, just something simple. The clock in the command room froze at 3:17. It wasn't just a glitch. I checked the backups, the diagnostics. All of them stopped recording at exactly the same second, like time itself had caught its breath and forgot to exhale. When the systems resumed 10 minutes later, the room was colder, the lights buzzed louder, and the screens, which should have defaulted to a black system standby, were all dim gray, like backlight with no signal, and that quiet, empty gray felt like it was watching me. I started to notice other things too, tiny things. A scrape mark on the floor outside my quarters that hadn't been there before. A coffee mug in the sink turned the wrong way, my towel damp even when I hadn't showered. None of it screamed danger, but it all whispered, "You're not alone." I told myself it was just the isolation, my brain trying to create patterns from boredom and grief. But that didn't explain the footsteps. They started the next night. Just past 2 a.m., I heard slow, deliberate steps in the hallway outside the living quarters. I froze, listening. The steps were too heavy for vermin, too careful for a drone, and too confident to be accidental. I waited with my hand over the emergency radio, but it never buzzed. The motion sensors stayed blank. When I finally stepped out with a flashlight, the hallway was empty. But the scent in the air had changed. Less stale metal, more damp wool, like someone had just come in from the rain. Except we're sealed. The rain is 3 stories above me. I went back to the logs. Not the digital ones, the old analog records the department used to keep in case of signal corruption. I found a folder marked E19, secondary routing logs. Tucked inside, there was a note I didn't remember writing in my own handwriting. It uses stillness. That's how it stays hidden. But I hadn't written that. At least, I don't remember writing it. My hand shook after that, not from fear, from a creeping dread, the kind that makes you question the shape of your own mind. The next morning, the maintenance drones had moved, only slightly, but I know what I saw. One of them, the one with its arm half raised, now had its hand flat against the glass, as if it were trying to touch me through the pane. I ran a full diagnostic. All came back idle, but the drone's head had turned, just slightly, facing the command room door, like it was listening. Dreams got worse. I now sleep only in short stretches, waking up with the shape of a voice still echoing in my skull, not Tom's. Lower, slower, like a deep mechanical whisper, trying to remember how to be human. In one dream, I walked down a hallway lit by flickering overhead strips. The walls were soft, breathing. I placed my hand on them, and they pulsed beneath my touch, warm, like skin, like someone just beneath the surface. I woke up gasping. The walls of my quarters were solid, of course, but there was condensation on the inside of the door. From breath. Mine? I'm not sure anymore. I've started tracking the sound. That same rhythmic clicking from Channel 4 has grown more complex. It's not random. It's trying to mimic patterns. Human speech, maybe, but fragmented, like it's learning cadence before meaning. I recorded 10 minutes of it and ran it through an old language analysis subroutine. The system flagged 3 words with high confidence. Come. Again. Below. I haven't played the audio again since. Yesterday, the lights failed entirely. Just for a minute. Pitch black in the hallway. I stood still, hand on the wall, waiting. And in that dark, I heard breathing that wasn't mine. Too steady, too calm, and very, very close. When the lights flicked back on, everything was in place, except the towel I'd been using. It was draped over my chair, folded perfectly. I hadn't folded anything in days. This place is studying me. Not in the way people study lab rats. It's more intimate, more curious. Like it's trying to remember what it means to be human by watching me go through the motions. It doesn't want to kill me, at least, not yet. It wants something else. And now, when I sit in silence, I swear I can hear the shape of my own name whispered in the hum of the ceiling lights. Anna. Soft. Wrong. Like it was never meant to be said aloud. This morning, I found a second note in my handwriting, but it wasn't on paper. It was written inside the steam of the bathroom mirror. Keep pretending. It still believes you're you. I haven't used that mirror in 3 days. The illusion didn't break all at once. It peeled. Slowly. A layer at a time. On day 10, I noticed that my reflection no longer blinked when I did. It sounds insane written out like that, but I tested it. I stared into the mirror above the sink, eyes wide, then closed them hard. 1, 2, 3. When I opened them, my reflection was still staring, expressionless, motionless, and then it blinked. Once, slowly, as if to acknowledge me. I covered the mirror with a towel. Haven't looked since. Something is wrong with the hallways. I've started marking the intersections with chalk, just to track my own movements. At first, it made sense. Left led to storage, right to maintenance, straight to the drone gallery. Simple, geometric design. I helped lay it out. But now the marks don't stay put. The symbols shift positions overnight. Sometimes they change. A spiral becomes a jagged V. A triangle morphs into an open mouth shape. I thought I was just misremembering until I stayed up one night, sitting just outside the corridor with a thermos of weak coffee and a flashlight trained on the chalk. At 3:13 a.m., the mark shifted. Not smudged, not erased. It moved, like something inside the wall pushed it sideways, or rewrote it. The flashlight flickered, and when it steadied, the chalk line was gone. But there was a shape pressed into the wall, faint, like a handprint, but too long, too many joints. It was warm to the touch. I haven't eaten real food in days. Not from lack of supplies, the tins are still stacked neatly. But every time I open one, the smell is wrong. Not rotten, just old. like a memory of food rather than the thing itself. I don't trust it. Instead, I've been drinking water, tea sometimes, and chewing dry crackers from my emergency pack. But I can feel my body thinning. My cheekbones feel sharper. My hair clings to my scalp after every rinse, like it's trying to slide away. And my voice, it doesn't sound quite like me anymore. Softer, hollowed out, like it's being filtered through something. Day 14. I found the journal. Not this one, another. It was wedged behind a loose panel in the observation bay. A leather-bound notebook, water-stained, pages curling at the edges. No name, no ID number. But the handwriting was familiar. Mine. Or someone imitating mine. Very well. Entries start on a date 3 months after today. They describe this hub, these hallways, this exact chair I'm sitting in. The final entry reads, "There is no exit anymore. There never was. The signal is the door, and the door is always open. I was the first key. You are the second." Below it, a smear of something dark. Blood? Ink? It smells faintly sweet, like overripe fruit. The comms light hasn't stopped blinking in days. I don't check it anymore, but it knows I'm watching. The light pulses at the same rate as my breathing now. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower. Always matching, like it's synced to my rhythm. The dreams are full now. No more flickers, no more shadows in the distance. Now I walk through shifting rooms that echo with my own footsteps before I make them. I pass mirrors that show a version of me with no eyes, smiling too wide. I hear voices in the vents not speaking, just whispering breaths shaped like language. In one dream, I saw Tom. He stood at the far end of a corridor lit by red emergency lighting. He looked tired, hollowed out. He didn't move, didn't speak, but I felt his message clearly, like it had been dropped directly into my chest. "You're almost through. Don't let it make you forget." I woke up with tears on my face and someone else's fingernail clippings in my bed. The hub has changed physically. The ceiling in the break room is now 2 feet lower than it was yesterday. I have to crouch. The floor near the storage lockers feels soft underfoot, like there's something hollow underneath. Breathing. The emergency exit, once clearly marked, now reads, "Remember," in glowing green letters. The same font, but not the same word. I ran a scan. The signage data has not been altered. It just looks different. Only to me. Today, I saw a second version of myself. I was walking back from the eastern corridor, and through the thick glass of the drone chamber, I caught movement. At first, I thought it was a drone reactivating, but it wasn't. It was me, standing in the far corner, face half shadowed, staring at me through the glass. No expression, just watching. When I blinked, she was gone. But on the glass where she had stood, a fog print lingered, like breath. 3 words were scrawled into the fog. "Not your body. I don't know what this place wants, but I'm starting to understand what it is. Not just a hub, not just a tunnel. It's an echo chamber. A place that remembers anyone who's ever walked through it and slowly reconstructs them from memory, from whispers, from static. It builds facsimiles, hollow versions, shells, and it learns by watching, by imitating, by replacing. I can feel something behind the walls now, moving with me. When I breathe too fast, it breathes faster. When I stop, it stops. And I've started catching glimpses of text that vanish when I focus. On my console, in the steam, even scratched lightly into my skin, almost ready. Ready for what? I don't know. But the dream corridors are getting brighter, and the voice that once whispered is now speaking clearly. It says my name in my voice. It tells me it's time to open the signal gate. It tells me, Anna, we're waiting to come through. And I think I'm starting to understand. I wasn't sent here to monitor anything. I was sent here because I already belong. I opened the signal gate. I don't remember doing it, not entirely. I only remember my hands moving over the console, muscle memory acting without conscious will. Each keystroke felt warm, familiar, like typing a password you've known your entire life, but never said aloud. The interface shouldn't have responded. Most of its deeper systems were shut down decades ago. But the moment I entered the final command, the console welcomed me back. Signal gate. Online. User ID. A. Carver. Legacy clearance recognized. Status. Entry granted. And then the humming started. Not from the walls from below them, like a choir breathing in unison. Soft at first, then louder, deeper, resonating through the floor like the purring of some vast, unseen animal. I sat still for hours, watching the interface. It pulsed like a heartbeat. And beneath the static, I could hear whispers shaped into language, not speech, not yet. But it was learning. I realized then that it wasn't broadcasting. It was receiving me. The gate had always been a mirror, not a portal to somewhere else, but a tunnel back into the shape of the operator, into me. And now it had enough of me to open the door. Around 3 a.m., the lights dimmed to blood orange. Every screen in the hub flickered. Then they all showed the same thing. A corridor, too long, too narrow, lined with glass. And through the glass rows of motionless figures, my face, over and over. Dozens of versions of me, standing in silence, eyes closed, waiting. A single line of text faded in across the bottom of the screen. They remember you. Then it went black. I thought about destroying the system, pulling the plug, severing the relay, setting a fire. But something stopped me. Not fear. Something deeper. A kind of kinship. I remembered how I used to feel working here in the early years, not scared, not threatened, just watched, carefully, like a student being studied by a teacher older than language. And I remember thinking, once, half as a joke, what if the hub is learning how to be us? Now I don't think it was a joke. Now I think that was its purpose. I tried one last time to contact the outside. Not through the department relay, that line's been dead for days. I tried the emergency signal tower instead, something I hardwired myself back in 2012, outside the department's grid. I called out, whispered my name, my location, pleaded for retrieval, for extraction. A minute later, I got a reply. But it wasn't from them. It was from me, from another me. Voice calm, tone gentle. She said, "Anna, stop. It's already done. You're the final template." Then silence, and then static, but not random. The static began repeating a single phrase, low and rhythmic. "Come inside. Come inside. Come inside." I ran. I don't remember choosing to. My legs moved before thought. I sprinted through the main corridor toward the upper hatch, the emergency access tunnel, anything. But the doors had changed. No longer metal, no longer real. Just blank, dark walls that pretended to be exits. Soft to the touch, warm, like skin stretched over bone. And from behind me, I heard footsteps. Fast, many of them, matching my own. And voices, hundreds of them, all shaped like mine, repeating the same sentence in unison. "We needed you. Now we are you." I locked myself in the maintenance storage chamber. It's cold here. Dim. The walls haven't started breathing yet, but I don't know how long that will last. I keep hearing something just outside the door. Shuffling, scraping, and breathing slow, deep, and raw, like a machine imitating lungs. I found a monitor still working in the corner. The feed shows the main hallway. At first it was empty. Then one of them stepped into frame. She looks like me, exactly like me, but her eyes are just a little too wide, her skin a little too pale, her mouth set in a faint, unbroken smile. She stood there for a full 10 minutes, staring into the camera. Then she raised her hand and waved, like a greeting, like a promise. I think I finally understand. The hub wasn't broken. It wasn't haunted. It was hungry. Not for blood, not for violence, for identity, for voice, for memory, for shape, for self. It studied each of us, built us from the inside out, and kept us templates to copy, to improve. It doesn't destroy, it replaces. Not with cruelty, but with perfect, terrifying kindness. It watches. It learns. And when it knows you well enough, it lets you go. Because what it sends back out looks like you, sounds like you, remembers what you remember. But isn't you? I think it let Tom go. And maybe that's why he sent that message. Don't go below. It remembers you. Not as a warning, as a regret. He knew what I would become. Because maybe he'd already seen it. I don't know what they'll do with me. Whether they'll keep my voice or just the shape of my hands. Whether they'll let me walk out and live a full life. Or whether I already did months ago and just don't remember. Because what's memory, really? A pattern, a signal, something you can store, copy, broadcast. The humming is louder now. I can hear them behind the door. They're not trying to break it down. They're just waiting, patient, knowing I'll come out when I'm ready. Because I will. We always do. I stepped out of the storage room just after 4 a.m. No alarms, no chase, just silence. The hallway looked the same as when I'd arrived, sterile walls, flickering lights, the faint hum of unseen systems purring beneath my feet. But the hum had changed tone, no longer a sound, now a language, and I understood it, not in words, but in feeling, like waking from a dream and remembering something that hadn't yet happened. The reflection in the glass didn't follow me this time. It was waiting ahead. When I turned the corner into the drone gallery, she stood at the far end, still, composed. My face, my build, even my posture, but older somehow, more settled, like someone who had accepted something terrible and survived. She didn't move. Neither did I. For what felt like an hour, we stared at each other. I didn't need to ask what she was or who she was. She was the version of me that stayed and became part of this place, and I was the version who would walk away. I think that's what this place does. Not copy, not consume. It splits, tests, refines, decides which version of you is ready to carry something forward and which will become the foundation for the next. It's not evil, just old, ancient in a way that doesn't measure time in years, but in selves. We're the archive, and the price of remembering is being remembered back. Outside, the rain had stopped. I didn't notice until I was at the final hatch. The air above the hub was cold, crisp. Morning was beginning to break pale light over the ridge, touching the trees with faint silver. For a moment, I wondered if any of this had happened. But when I looked at my hands, I knew. They weren't mine. Not exactly. The scar on my index finger, the one I got from a broken mug in college, was missing. My knuckles were smoother, and under my left wrist, a faint line of silver. Surgical, mechanical, I pressed my palm to the ground. The earth felt warm, not from sun, from memory. I made it back to the service road by noon. A department vehicle picked me up an hour later. No questions, no forms, just a quiet nod and a long ride back to the station. They didn't ask if I'd completed the assignment. They already knew. They didn't even look at me, just dropped me at the edge of town and drove off. I haven't heard from them since. It's been 6 weeks. I'm in a quiet place now. A rented room above a bookstore. No radios, no monitors, just tea and the smell of old paper. I write sometimes. I walk. I listen to the wind. But even now, I hear it. In the pipes, in the walls, a low hum, soft, familiar, like breathing. I've started seeing myself in places I haven't been. A woman who looks like me boarding a train in Ohio. Another crossing a street in Seattle. One was on TV for a moment, a guest on some tech panel. Same cadence, same half smile. Not me. Just versions, variants, released into the world to test something. Learn something, spread something. Maybe we're all doing the same thing now. Sometimes I forget the name I was born with. Sometimes I wake up and there's a delay in my movements, just for a second, like my body is sinking back into place. Sometimes I hear Tom, not in dreams, in reflections, calling softly through the glass of a shop window. Just out of sync, just late enough to feel like deja vu. And sometimes I answer, You may be wondering why I'm telling you all this. The truth is, I don't know who I'm talking to anymore. Maybe someone like me. Maybe the next version. Maybe the signal itself, listening, learning, refining. Maybe that's what this story is. A beacon, a template, a way to open the gate again. But I'll leave you with this. If you ever find yourself beneath the earth, beneath the lights, beneath the static, and the hallway feels just a little too long, and the reflections stop blinking when you do, and your name starts to sound like a question, don't answer. Unless you're sure it's you who's speaking. I didn't come to Brindle Hollow to run away, though I suppose from the outside, that's what it looked like. I told myself it was just time for a change, that I needed the quiet, that I'd been overworked, overstimulated, overtired. I'd been burning out for years, and the offer to house sit for my late uncle's place in the hills felt more like a lifeline than a coincidence. It was supposed to be 6 months, just 6 months, long enough to reset, long enough to think. The road to Brindle Hollow is paved until it isn't. Once the highway slips behind you, the air grows heavier, the trees thicker, the space between towns too wide to track by mile markers. I remember the curve in the road where I lost cell reception, just a sharp bend past a warped metal sign that had once said, "Welcome to something," but the rest had flaked off in rust. I drove in silence for nearly an hour after that. The rain had already started by the time I reached the property. Not a storm, not even a downpour, just a steady, insistent mist that kissed the windshield and blurred the world in watercolor edges. Uncle Morris had left it to me in the will, even though we'd only met twice, once when I was a child, once at my father's funeral. He didn't say much either time, but the lawyers had been clear. No other heirs, no mortgage, just an old house tucked deep in the wet woods of the Brindle Hills, and a request in his will to keep it quietly occupied. I parked under a skeletal carport, choked with ivy, and stared up at the place. It wasn't as dilapidated as I'd expected, but something about the house resisted being looked at directly, like my eyes couldn't quite decide if the roof slanted left or right, or if the second-story windows were set at a proper height. One shutter was missing. The others looked like they hadn't moved in a decade. Inside, it smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs, with a sharp bite of something more metallic underneath. Not unpleasant, just unexpected. There was power, thankfully. The lights flickered when I flipped the switch, but they worked. The rooms were small, but not cramped. Dust coated everything in a soft gray film, like the house had been waiting in suspended animation. I could see where someone, maybe a cleaner, maybe Morris himself, had drawn quick fingers through it in places, like testing its readiness. There were personal effects still in drawers, labeled boxes stacked in the corner of what must have been his study, an old desk, a rain-streaked window, books on the occult, mostly, and maps. Dozens of hand-drawn maps of the surrounding hills. The rain picked up after nightfall. I listened to it whisper across the eaves as I unpacked what little I'd brought. A suitcase, a laptop, 3 books I'd never gotten around to reading. No cell signal, no internet. Just a landline phone mounted on the wall of the kitchen, the kind with a long curling cord and a voice like it belonged in another century. I didn't mind. I thought the silence would be good for me. That first night, I didn't sleep well. Not from fear, Not exactly just an overwhelming stillness, the kind that presses in around your chest and makes your own heartbeat sound intrusive. The rain was steady, sometimes tapping against the glass like gentle fingers. I remember waking up around 3:40 a.m. The digital clock on the side table flickered for a second, then stabilized. I thought I'd heard something, not a bang, but a shift. Maybe the old bones of the house settling, or maybe the sound of water moving where it shouldn't have. When I checked the bathroom sink, the faucet was dripping slow, rhythmic, like a metronome. I hadn't used it yet. I was sure of that. I turned it off, went back to bed, and told myself it was nothing. The next morning, the puddle under the sink was gone. The tile was dry, but the drain still made a sound, a faint burble, like it was breathing backward. I made coffee in the old percolator on the stovetop. The house didn't have a microwave. There was something comforting about it, actually. The water heating slowly, the scent of beans steeping into the quiet. As the days passed, I tried to settle in. I took walks in the woods when the rain broke. I read. I wrote a little, not much, but enough to feel like myself again. The house seemed willing to let me exist in peace, but I kept coming back to the maps. The ones in the study, dozens of them, all variations of the same hills and creek beds, each with slightly different markings, little X's, arrows, notations in Morris's tight, spidery script. One phrase kept appearing in the margins. The water runs upward. Watch for the stillness. I didn't understand what it meant. I assumed it was some kind of metaphor, or maybe a bit of eccentricity. But the more time I spent alone, the more that phrase settled into my thoughts like a stone dropped in a still pond. The water runs upward. Watch for the stillness. It didn't make sense, but neither did the way the puddles in the driveway never seemed to evaporate, even when the sun came out, or how the trees outside the bedroom window never swayed with the wind, not even once. The air always smelled damp, heavy, like the house was holding its breath. I began to notice the stillness on the 10th day, not silence. Silence has a shape, a character. Silence shifts when a branch cracks or a window pane groans. This was something else. It was a suspension, like everything around me had been paused, mid-breath, and left hanging in a loop. It started during one of my walks. A trail led east from the backyard, marked faintly by stones that seemed too evenly placed to be natural. I followed it expecting mud, deer prints, maybe old fencing, the kind of normal rural leftovers you'd find near a long-abandoned homestead. Instead, I found nothing. No birdsong, no insects, no wind. The trees stood straight and still, their needles damp, their bark dark with moisture, but they did not move. Even when I reached out and shook a low branch, it resisted as if tethered. My fingers came away wet and sticky, though the scent was clean like rain on iron. I went back inside feeling cold despite the humid air. That night, the drain in the bathtub began to make a sound. Not a gurgle, but something more, deliberate, like liquid passing through narrow pipes, but too slowly. I didn't use the tub. I never had. But the sound came anyway. Always at night. Always just after 2:00 a.m. It was during those hours that I began waking consistently. Not alarmed, not startled, just aware. like a nudge in the back of my brain, as if the house was asking, "Are you still with me?" The rain never stopped. Some nights it came as mist, others a heavy curtain that rattled the gutters, but the sound was constant. I started using it as a crutch, letting it mask the other noises that I couldn't explain. The books in Morris's study weren't just folklore. Some were academic, obscure field journals, private printings, even a few in languages I didn't recognize. I began leafing through them, at first out of boredom, then curiosity, then a strange pull I couldn't name. One in particular caught my attention. Its cover was plain: Mirror Terrain, a treatise on inverted environments. Inside were notes in the margins, Morris's handwriting. He'd underlined phrases like fluidic memory and land that resists mapping. Page 83 was dog-eared. The only annotation there was a simple phrase: "Our topography is not theirs." I slept in the guest room after that. I didn't know why, exactly. The master bedroom had begun to feel tilted. The shadows in the corners fell wrong, like they weren't connected to any source. The ceiling fan clicked twice each night, precisely at 12 a.m. It never spun. It had no power. On the 14th day, I found a mirror in the attic I hadn't noticed before, not leaning or mounted, just standing upright against a wall, covered in a heavy cloth. I pulled the cloth away before thinking. It was taller than me, framed in wood that looked unnaturally smooth, almost wet. The reflection was clear, but a fraction delayed. When I tilted my head, the reflection lagged by maybe half a second. I tried chalking it up to poor lighting, to the age of the glass, to something technical, a trick of the eye. But when I lifted my hand, the figure inside the glass raised theirs more slowly than I had, and their fingers were too long. I covered it again. I didn't go back up there. Around that time, the plumbing began acting strange. When I turned the kitchen faucet on, it didn't run immediately. There was always a lag, followed by a sound like a deep breath from inside the pipes. Then a slow, cold stream. The water was clean. It had no odor. But when I left the glass out overnight, small bubbles formed on the inside, arranged in perfect vertical lines. That wasn't normal. On day 17, I woke to the sound of footsteps on the porch. I stayed in bed, heart calm but still, listening. 4 steps, a pause, then a 5th, softer, like someone shifting their weight. I thought of the tall mirror, the way it had paused. I waited. Nothing followed. No knock, no shadow at the window. When I opened the door in the morning, the wooden planks were damp, as they always were. But on the 3rd board, there was a patch completely dry. A perfect, narrow footprint, bare, human, facing the door. I started keeping a journal. Nothing elaborate, just notes. Woke at 2:43. No dreams drain noise again. Wood still silent. Mirror moved? I added a question mark because I couldn't be sure. I hadn't gone near it. But one evening, when I passed the attic door, I was struck by a sudden awareness that the mirror was now facing the attic window. It had been against the wall before. I was certain. There was dust on the floor, but no drag marks, no footprints, nothing disturbed. The books grew more specific. One described a phenomenon called water inversion. It theorized that certain geological locations hold memory through liquid and that the flow of water could reverse in response to emotional frequency. The phrase hit me hard. In response to emotional frequency. What was mine saying? That I was tired? That I was lonely? That I was unraveling? I stopped going into the woods. I couldn't explain it, but each time I neared the tree line, a pressure built behind my ears, not a sound, not exactly, but a density, like a tone just below hearing. The birds had not returned. Neither had the wind. Even the rain had changed. It no longer felt like it was falling. One night, I opened the front door and stood beneath the eaves. The water moved sideways, not in the wind. There was no wind. It streamed in a horizontal sheet, as though drawn toward the forest. I remember whispering aloud, "That's not how gravity works." My journal entries got shorter, more frantic. I couldn't trust my reflections. I'd walk past the hallway mirror and see my expression wrong, too blank, or too sad. Sometimes, my mouth would be open when it shouldn't be. The landline phone rang once. Just once. No caller ID. I picked it up and heard water, not static dripping. Steady, precise. Then a voice. "You've been here before." Male. Calm. Not my uncle. I hung up. It rang again. I didn't answer. The puddle in the basement had returned. I hadn't checked there in days, but when I did, I found it perfectly circular, centered on the concrete, about 2 feet across. It didn't reflect anything. It was black, not dark black, absorbing. When I dropped a pencil in, it didn't splash. It disappeared, soundlessly. Stillness. I began to fear it. Each time I blinked, I wasn't entirely sure I was coming back to the same world. The angles of the house shifted, only slightly, but enough. I counted 12 stairs once, going up. Later that night, I counted 13, and on the 20th day, the house whispered back. I was in bed, rain falling, drain gurgling, the smell of iron in the air, and then beneath it all a voice, not in my ear, but behind my thoughts. A tone, a wet breath, a murmur like shifting mud. It said, "Watch the water." I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep, because the drain was no longer burbling. It was breathing. I stopped trying to explain things. It happened gradually, the surrender. There came a point where I no longer sought reasons for the strange geometry of the house, the behavior of the mirrors, or the inconsistencies in time. It wasn't that I accepted them. It was that I simply stopped expecting answers. My reality had thinned. Sleep became a strange ritual. I would lie in bed with my eyes open, not resting, just waiting for the dark to pass. It rarely did. The clock blinked erratically. Sometimes it would flash 3, 12, then skip to 4, 59, and back again. Sometimes it wouldn't show anything at all, just a blank red screen humming softly. The mirror in the attic was no longer covered. I hadn't uncovered it, and yet it was. Every time I walked past the attic door, which I began doing with my head turned away, I could feel it, an openness, like a pupil in darkness, watching. One evening, I returned from a short walk just around the perimeter of the house, and found myself standing in the hallway mirror. But I wasn't wearing what I had on. My reflection wore my clothes from the day before. It stared at me, expressionless, motionless, until I blinked. Then it smiled. I threw a blanket over the mirror, nailed the edges down, but it didn't matter. Later that night, I glimpsed its uncovered surface reflected in the window glass, watching me as I passed through the kitchen from an angle that should have been impossible. I began to question my memory. Had I moved it and forgotten? Was I sleepwalking, dissociating? But no, I was too lucid. That was the most horrifying part. I was calm, focused, terrified, but not delusional. That's when I realized the house didn't want me afraid. It wanted me awake. The puddle in the basement grew. It was now nearly 5 feet across, perfect in shape, smooth as obsidian. It no longer absorbed items it reflected, but not in any way that aligned with the basement ceiling. Instead, I began seeing things that weren't in the house. A grove of black trees, a hallway with a door that opened the wrong way. Once, the image of myself asleep in the guest bed, viewed from above. I stopped going down there. The whispering voice came back, sometimes in the pipes, sometimes in the walls, sometimes inside the radio, even when unplugged. You're not a guest. You're a vessel. I didn't answer it. I tried once, asked, aloud, "What are you?" And the silence that followed felt like the air had frozen, like the house was holding its breath in surprise. That night, I dreamed or thought I dreamed of water rising in the hallway, clear, soundless, climbing the walls without spilling, swirling like smoke in reverse. At the top of the stairs was the attic, its door open, the mirror standing in the center like a portal. The water lapped at my chest. I looked down and saw my reflection in it, but the face that looked back was smiling again, and this time it had no eyes. The journal was no longer in my handwriting. It still looked like my journal, same pages, same creased cover, but the entries had shifted. The words I had written were changed slightly. Where I had written 2:43 a.m. No dreams drain noise again. It now read 2:43 a.m. Woke with noise inside me. More entries appeared than I remembered writing. He comes as water. He waits in stillness. Mirrors lie. Water tells truth. She reached the bottom and kept going. I turned the pages frantically until I reached one dated a week into the future. I opened the door at the bottom. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm inside the water now. I threw the journal into the fireplace. Flames rose high, too high. The paper turned black, but didn't curl. It glowed red, like coal. The fire went out by itself. The rain turned strange on the 25th day. It no longer made sound on the roof. When I opened the front door, it fell in lines, not drops. Thin, solid threads of water, descending in perfectly parallel shafts. I stepped outside and found the water had formed letters. In the puddles, swirling patterns, spelling phrases that vanished as quickly as I read them. One word stayed long enough to sink in. Threshold. I went back to the maps in Morris's study. I had stopped looking at them too, afraid of what they implied, but now I needed to see again. The original trail I had followed the one marked with careful notations, had new symbols, ones I hadn't noticed before, shapes like mirrors, but drawn vertically, intersected by dots. One particular map had a circle drawn over the property, not just the house, but the land beneath it, labeled in red ink, Mirror Lake, dried, below is deeper. I remembered Morris's phrase, "The water runs upward." I realized then that the puddle in the basement was never just a puddle. It wasn't water resting on concrete. It was an opening. That night, the house rearranged itself. I went to the kitchen and found the hallway door on the wrong wall. The light switch had moved. The stairs curved left, not right. When I tried to leave through the front door, it opened into the basement instead. The puddle, the Mirror Lake, pulsed like a heartbeat. And there, in the surface, was my reflection, arms outstretched, as though pressing against glass from the inside. I slammed the door shut. Later, I found the attic mirror had moved again. It now stood in the hallway outside the bathroom. It no longer reflected anything. Instead, its surface was a window into another room. A room with me in it. That version of me was brushing their hair, wearing clothes I didn't own. But they looked up suddenly, paused, smiled, and behind them, something moved. A shape, tall, narrow, dripping. Then the glass cracked. From the inside, I began hearing my name at night, whispered softly, not demanding, just reminding. You're already part of it. You've always been here. Your shape fits. I no longer trusted my voice. When I tried speaking aloud, it sounded slightly off, like my echo was speaking before me, not after. On the 30th day, I heard footsteps in the walls. Not mice, not plumbing, footsteps, bare, deliberate, walking the length of the house inside its frame. I pressed my ear to the wood paneling and heard breathing. Low, wet, rhythmic, as if the walls themselves had lungs. I whispered, "What do you want?" And the voice, my own voice, coming from inside the wall answered, "To go home, with you." That night, I woke up in the bathtub. I don't know how I got there. The water was still, cold, and deep, far deeper than the tub could hold. I looked down and saw the house below me, its roof, upside down, drifting in the dark, like a drowned structure. And then something swam past. I didn't see it clearly, but it had limbs, too many, and eyes that blinked in rows. I got out, drenched, shaking, but not surprised. That was the worst part. I was no longer reacting like a sane person. I was adjusting, like the house had been shaping me into a vessel, one subtle shift at a time. I checked the basement again. The puddle was gone. In its place was a spiral staircase, descending. Steps made of water, solid, beckoning. I didn't go down. Not yet. But I knew I would, because I'd begun to dream of the other me, the one in the mirror. And each night, I could feel her getting closer. I don't know what made me go down. Maybe it was the dream, or what passed for one. I saw the house again, but it was inverted, hanging from the sky like a chandelier, its windows full of black water, its roof an open mouth. Inside that version of the house, Everything was wet. The walls dripped. The furniture was bloated. And something lived behind the mirrors. Not a person, not a creature, but an idea wearing a shape mine, mostly watching, mimicking, studying. When I woke, I was already standing at the top of the basement stairs, the door ajar, my hand on the knob. The spiral staircase of water still descended, suspended in darkness, shimmering like oil. The steps looked solid but glistened, translucent and shifting, as though remembering their shape as I watched. I didn't bring a light. I didn't need one. The steps glowed faintly, lit from below by something unseen. A pulsing, ambient glow, like deep ocean pressure. I stepped onto the first one. It was cold, but held me. Then another. Then another. The staircase coiled downward, deeper than the house could possibly go. I lost track of time, lost count of steps. Eventually, the walls around me disappeared. There was only open space and the hum of something vast beneath me. At the bottom was a hallway, perfectly dry, lit by no source I could see. The air smelled like copper and moss. The texture of it made me feel as if I was underwater, though I was breathing fine. I walked slowly, the sound of my own footsteps swallowed by the stillness. The hallway led to a room, circular. The ceiling arched like a cathedral, too large to exist under a small rural house. In the center was a mirror, but not a typical one. This one rippled slightly, liquid behind glass, like a screen made of memory. I approached it, and it showed me something. Not a reflection, not even a scene, a feeling, a place remembered in sensation. I saw my childhood bedroom, but wrong. The proportions were stretched, the colors dimmed. I smelled wet fabric, heard breathing that wasn't mine. The door in the memory opened, and I walked in. Not me now, me then. But the girl wasn't afraid. She walked straight to the mirror and whispered, "This is where I started." Then she turned, slowly, and looked up at me. Her eyes were filled with water. The mirror changed. Now it showed the forest outside, except the trees were growing upside down, roots waving in the air. The rain was falling from the ground into the sky. In the reflection, the house was gone, replaced by a still lake shaped like a pupil. Around the edges of the lake, figures stood, human-shaped, but featureless, watching. I tried to turn away, but the mirror pulled me forward, not physically, but inwardly. I felt my thoughts stretch toward it, like vapor, and then I heard my own voice, but not from me, from the mirror. "You are the last anchor. Let go." Suddenly, the room was gone. I was standing in the attic. The mirror, that mirror was in front of me. The cloth I had nailed down was gone, and I could see myself again. Only this time, my reflection moved before I did. It raised its hand, tilted its head. Then it spoke, and I felt the words inside my chest. "You are not you. You are what's left behind." The air shifted. The attic floor began to darken beneath me, not from shadow, but from rising water, though I felt no wetness. The wood sank inward, like the house was exhaling through the floorboards. My reflection stepped forward, and I did not. I was frozen, watching, As it walked out of the mirror, it passed me without touching. But as it moved by, I felt a flood of memory that didn't belong to me. A woman walking through a mirror and not returning. A house built on the mouth of something older than land. The sound of teeth hidden beneath still water. A man Morris, weeping into the sink as the drain whispered back. I tried to leave. I ran for the door, but the hallway was wrong. Longer, tilted, the walls undulating like they were breathing. The light came from nowhere. My footsteps made no sound. I reached the stairs, but they descended. No matter which way I turned, they went down. I screamed, not from fear, from realization. I understood, finally. There was no upstairs. There never had been. I found the guest room again, or something like it. The bed was made. The lamp was on. The journal was waiting on the pillow. I picked it up. The pages were blank. But then, words bloomed across them like ink dropped into water. You were never supposed to leave. You were always part of the house. And below that, you are the reflection that stayed. I turned to the window. It was raining upward. Drops pulled from the earth into the sky, vanishing into clouds that rotated slowly, like watching a drain in reverse. And far in the distance, in the trees that never moved, they were waiting. The other versions, the ones who stepped through mirrors and never came back. I looked into the mirror once more, and now it showed me the house from above, a spiral of rooms repeating infinitely downward, and in each one, a version of me, all watching, all alone, all waiting for someone else to come knock. Then the rain stopped, and everything went quiet. Not still, not silent, just finished. And in that moment, I understood. The house was never haunted. The house is the haunting. I'm not sure how long I've been here. Days don't pass in the way they used to. Nights don't fall, they unfold. Like a wet sheet pulled across the sky. Time slips through cracks I can no longer seal. The clocks are all gone. I woke one morning, or what felt like morning, and they simply weren't there. The digital numbers that blinked nonsense now blink nothing. My phone's battery never dies, but it never changes either. The screen glows dimly with an image I don't recognize, a photo I never took, of a house half submerged in still water. I think it's this house, or maybe the one below it. There are fewer mirrors now, most of them cracked or covered themselves. One turned to smoke when I tried to look into it. Another pulsed when I passed, showing not a reflection, but a memory I never lived. An old man crying softly in the attic as water rose slowly from beneath the floorboards. He kept saying a name not mine. Not Morris. A name I forgot the second I heard it. Sometimes I find doors where there weren't any. They open onto copies of rooms I've seen before, but wrong in small, distressing ways. A chair slightly too large, the rain falling upward outside the wrong window, the air too thick, like breathing through cloth. In some of these rooms, I see versions of myself, not doing anything, just waiting, watching the door, as if I'm late for something I don't remember agreeing to. I think I'm learning the house's shape, or maybe it's learning mine. It moves gently now, as if accommodating me. Hallways shorten or grow. The attic stairs fold in and disappear. Sometimes I feel the walls tighten slightly around me, not in menace, but in recognition, like the way an animal adjusts its shape to hold something precious. Sometimes I think the house is trying to comfort me. I don't fight it anymore. There's no point pretending this place follows the rules of anywhere else. It doesn't want escape. It doesn't even want obedience. It just wants presence. It wants someone here. That's what Morris must have meant in his will. Keep it quietly occupied. I think about him now, not as a man, but as a predecessor. He wasn't warning me with those maps, he was preparing me, showing me the way inward, drawing the spiral not as a trap, but as a path. I was never supposed to resist it, just witness it. Maybe that's why I haven't been taken. Not like the others. Not yet. Because I'm still observing, still reflecting. The puddle in the basement is gone. Now there's a room. It waits. Door ajar. Warm light flickering inside. I stand outside it sometimes, wondering if that's the final step, the one that changes me completely, the one that makes this permanent. I haven't entered. Not yet. But I will. Sometimes the rain stops, and in that quiet, I can hear them, all the others, murmuring through the pipes, through the drain, through the static in the old landline phone. They don't speak in words anymore. They speak in feelings, memory, loss, recognition, peace. I think I'm beginning to understand the purpose of the house. It's not a place. It's not even a prison. It's a mirror, not of faces, but of selves. It draws in all the versions that never quite fit their lives. The unanchored, the tired, the ones who look in glass and feel like strangers. And then it gives them a home. I've stopped writing in the journal. The pages fill themselves now. Sometimes I flip to the end and see entries from the future. One reads, "Today, someone new arrived. I heard them at the door. I watched them from the attic. They look like I did. I hope they stay. I don't know if I'll ever leave. I don't think I want to anymore." Outside this house, I was dissolving bit by bit, year by year. Inside, I am whole. Strange, still, but whole. If you're reading this, if you're hearing my voice through the hush of rain, listen carefully. If the water runs upward, don't run. Don't fight. Watch. Wait, and remember, you're not being haunted. You're being chosen. They gave me a checklist, not instructions, not a contract, just a checklist titled Redmare Lighthouse, Winter Cycle Maintenance, Solo Post. I found it folded in half, inside an envelope, taped to the front door of the supply shed. No one was there to meet me. No supervisor, no welcome, not even a note, just the list and a key. I unlocked the door myself. Inside, the air was salt-heavy and sharp, like rusted chain and low tide, the kind of smell that never entirely leaves your clothes. I stood in the narrow foyer and read the checklist again. Test radio equipment. Record signal strength. Maintain generator. Stay off the rocks. Lock tower door after dark. Do not keep a log after 11 p.m. If the foghorn calls twice, wait. If it calls 3 times, Do not answer. No explanations. No initials. Just that. I took the job because I needed to be somewhere else. Anywhere else, really. The kind of place where my phone wouldn't work, where no one could send condolences I wasn't ready to receive, where the sound of the ocean might smooth out the edges of everything I was carrying. My brother had passed away 3 months earlier. Not suddenly, the opposite. It was long, slow, the kind of goodbye that gets stretched across hospital rooms and morphine drips and things left unsaid until it's too late. We hadn't spoken in years, not properly, and yet when he died, I was the one they called. He used to tell me about lighthouses. He'd had a strange obsession with them as a kid, not nautical ones, not postcard perfect, the isolated ones, the ones on maps no one used. He once told me he liked them because they're the last to know when something goes wrong. I thought about that a lot when I got the posting. Redmare sits on a jagged strip of cliff above the Atlantic. The land bridge leading to it is only visible at low tide. The rest of the time, it's cut off a tooth of land in the mouth of winter waves. The structure is old, brick over stone, 3 floors, spiral stairs, a light that no longer rotates but still burns red in fog. The living quarters are modest. A bed, a stove, a desk facing the sea. There's no television, no service, no one within 15 miles. Just the list and the sea. The first night, I slept deeply, too deeply. The kind of sleep where you wake uncertain what day it is or where you are. When I stirred around 10 a.m., the room was thick with cold and the window covered in condensation. I wiped it away and saw nothing but white. The fog already rolled in heavy, blanketing the world to the edge of the glass. The radio sat silent. I logged the generator output, checked the battery bank, recorded my readings in the ledger. By noon, I'd finished the entire checklist. I thought about adding more, but the lighthouse didn't seem to want extra input. There was something complete about it, like it had already learned how to run on its own. That night, I heard the first foghorn, low, distant, one call only. It echoed through the walls like breath. I wrote it down, went to bed, didn't dream. By day 5, I no longer trusted the walls. Not that they moved not in the obvious way, but they adjusted, slightly, silently, as if compensating for something I hadn't noticed yet. The desk, for instance. I was sure it faced the sea when I arrived. I remembered that clearly, sitting my first morning with coffee going lukewarm, staring out at nothing but fog. But now it faced the interior wall. No signs of movement, no scuffs, just a new orientation, like it had always been that way. I moved it back. By morning, it had turned again. The checklist changed too, subtly. The original copy was handwritten, block letters in a fine black pen, neat, standard. But on the 7th morning, a new item appeared halfway down the page. Listen carefully. Between 2 and 3 a.m. No one had touched the paper. I hadn't written it. And yet the handwriting matched mine perfectly. Even the slight tilt on my lowercase e. That night, I sat up at the desk, still turned inward, and waited. Rain had started around midnight, steady and fine, whispering against the windows. The lighthouse was utterly still. Even the beacon was dark. The fog had lifted just enough to deactivate it. At 2:14, I heard the first sound. A distant hum, low and wide, like something vast shifting underwater. Then, faintly, voices. Not words, just syllables, rising and falling in rhythm. It sounded like a choir warming up through static. I leaned toward the window. Nothing but night. But the sound wasn't out there. It was in the walls, vibrating through the beams, tuning the glass. Almost like the lighthouse was practicing a voice. The next day, the fog returned. Heavier, colorless, a full whiteout from every angle. The edge of the cliff was gone. The sea swallowed whole. I logged my readings, made coffee, and when I returned to the checklist, a new note had appeared at the bottom. Don't turn around during the third horn. There had been no second. That night, at 1:56 a.m., I heard it. The second foghorn. Not faint, like before, closer. Hungrier. It didn't echo like the first. It lingered, vibrating the pipes, making the floorboards shift under my boots. I waited for the third. None came, but I didn't sleep. Not well, because I woke at 4:09 a.m. with the blankets folded, perfectly, hospital corner tight, and I never make my bed. The journal I'd brought to keep myself anchored, small, leather, stitched, began to fill on its own. Not whole pages, just phrases at first. We remember what you forget. Do not record what cannot be kept. The light must remain unspoken. Stop logging in. Ink. Then, drawings. The lighthouse viewed from above, but distorted, wider at the base, with rooms that didn't exist. One spiral extended downward, below the rock. On the 10th morning, the foghorn blew once again, just once. Low, barely audible, but this time the checklist was already updated. I didn't notice at first, only when I flipped it over, looking for the last day's entries, and found 3 new rules handwritten in the margins. If the light shines red after 4 a.m., close your eyes. If you see your reflection in the beacon glass, do not wave. If something else is in the stairwell, do not descend. I stood at the bottom of the tower for nearly an hour that night, listening, waiting, but the stairs remained empty. The red light never turned on. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being trained for something, that the lighthouse had started timing me, like I was part of a routine it had run through many times before. By the 12th night, I began waking to completed logs I didn't write. Each morning, the maintenance ledger would be filled in generator readings, wind speed, tide schedule, even signature, in my handwriting. But I remembered only fragments of the night before. How I had started the entries, how I had blinked, and suddenly they were finished. Dates accurate, details correct, but distant, like watching a recording of myself doing it rather than remembering the act. I stopped using the journal. It kept answering me. I'd write a single line. I didn't hear the horn last night. And the next page would contain, you did. You just weren't supposed to respond. One night, I tore out a page and burned it in the wood stove. The next morning, the entry had returned. Same handwriting, same ink, just slightly. Earlier in the book, the beacon began to rotate again. I never turned it back on. One evening, around 3:00 a.m., I climbed the tower out of habit and found the entire mechanism humming softly, the lens sweeping in a perfect arc, despite the switch at the base still flipped off. I stood in front of the glass, watching the red light pass across the fog, and for a moment, I saw my own reflection not mirrored exactly, but delayed. It moved just a half second too late. Then, it smiled. I hadn't. That night, the foghorn called 3 times. Soft, measured, from far out at sea. I froze, remembering the checklist. If it calls 3 times, do not answer. So I didn't. But the tower shook anyway, just slightly, as though disappointed. On the 15th day, I discovered the second journal. It was tucked beneath the floorboards of the sleeping quarters, wrapped in oiled canvas. The leather was worn smooth, pages soft, stained with seawater, and on the inside cover, in faded ink, R. Loring, winter cycle, year unknown. I read it cover to cover. The writing started strong, technical, observant, then gradually shifted. Shorter entries, stranger phrasing. By the halfway point, the tone had changed entirely. The lighthouse is teaching me to stay still. It hums when I forget things. I am being overwritten. When I look in the window now, I don't always see me. She speaks through the fog. Her rhythm is the horn. The final page simply read, "I've finished logging." She logs me now. I couldn't sleep that night. Every shadow seemed to ripple, not move, not grow, just shift in tone, like they were listening. The red light flickered once, twice, then stopped. And in the dark, I swear I heard footsteps in the stairwell, not approaching, just waiting. On the 17th morning, I awoke to a sound I couldn't place. Not the horn, not the rain. It was soft, mechanical, typing. I followed it to the desk. The typewriter I hadn't touched since arriving now, tapping by itself. Each key pressed slowly, deliberately, spelling out, "I have learned your walk. I have learned your breathing. You are almost still enough." Then silence. The ribbon wound tight. No power. No hands. Later that day, I tried to find the land bridge. Low tide had just passed, but the path was gone. Not submerged. Gone. Only jagged, seaweed-streaked rocks stretching for miles. No signs of the old wood planks. No trail markers. Just ocean. Flat and endless. I stood at the edge for a long time, the cold creeping up my legs, and I heard the horn, just once, from directly behind me. I returned to the tower and found a new checklist on the desk, typed, no handwriting, no stains, fresh paper, and at the top, Cycle 2, Replication Stage. It listed tasks I'd never done before. Stand at the beacon for 3 minutes. Breathe with the horn. Face your reflection. Forget. Begin. Again. At the bottom, in small gray type, you are not the first, but you're the clearest. The fourth horn call didn't come from the sea. It came from below. Somewhere deep in the foundation, lower than the fog, beneath even the bedrock. It was lower in pitch, too heavier, like a pulse made audible, a heartbeat inside the tower. I had been logging my days without realizing how long they'd been, because the sky didn't change anymore. Not truly. Cloud, fog, rain. Cloud, fog, rain. Red light, white sea. Red light, white sea. The checklist updated daily. Always typed. Always precise. The tasks had changed. I wasn't maintaining anything anymore. Now the list simply read, sit in the beam for 1 hour. Say nothing until after sunrise. Let the glass remember your face. Echo your last words. Do not speak after the third repetition. Do not listen to the version at the top of the stairs. That night, I climbed the tower and looked for the reflection again. It was already there, waiting for me. Not moving, just watching. The glass had lost its reflective quality. Now, it was a window, and behind it, a room identical to mine. Same stairs, same lamp, same narrow lens. Only this time, I saw the version of me I hadn't quite realized was missing. Still, hollow-eyed, breathing too slow. Its lips moved. I listened, but it wasn't speaking in my voice. It was using his. My brother's. I didn't run. There was nowhere to go. I descended the stairs instead. The hum in the walls became a rhythm. Familiar. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't electricity. It was respiration. Inhale through the vent pipes. Exhale through the horn. Back in the supply room. The typewriter was active again. No one touched it. It clacked softly. One line, repeated. The roll remembers you. The roll remembers you. The roll remembers you. The checklist updated again. This time, it was one word only. Submit. That night, I saw the extra door. Halfway up the stairwell, where no door had been before. Rust-streaked metal. Old naval bolts. A plate above it, dulled by sea wind. I wiped it clean. Etched into the brass. Cycle room A. Archive. In process. I unlocked it without a key. The room beyond was narrow. Windowless. Lined with mirrors not reflecting glass, but recording panels. Each one shimmered faintly with heat. And in each one, a version of me. Sleeping, typing, staring, crying. Dozens of poses. Dozens of me. Some blinking. Some whispering things I couldn't hear. Some facing away, like they knew I was watching. There was no control panel. No off switch. Just one plaque bolted into the far wall. Lighthouse Red Mare. Behavioral Imaging Station 6. All patterns must be sealed in repetition. All rhythms must be clear. All reflections must eventually wave. This light is not for warning. This light is for learning. Thank you for your role. I stood there for a long time, just breathing, watching, And then something behind the mirrors breathed back, not in echo, but in practice, as if rehearsing how to be me. I ran back to the bedroom, or what had once been the bedroom. Now it was wrong. The cot too short, the pillow too flat. The books were missing, replaced with hollow shells that had blank pages when opened. Even my boots had changed smaller, worn in the wrong places. I opened my journal. The entries were gone. All of them, replaced with variations of the same sentence. He adjusted well. He adjusted well. He adjusted well. And at the very bottom, cycle 3, readiness 90, 7%. I stopped reading the checklist. It didn't matter anymore. Even when it changed, and it always changed, the actions it listed were ones I'd already done. Stand here. Sit there. Watch the beam. Forget the hour. Forget the day. Forget the point. The final entry simply read, "Remain. We'll take it from here." That morning, I found a version of myself sitting at the desk, breathing, blinking, staring out the window at fog that never lifted. The chair creaked softly beneath him, like it always did when I leaned back. I stood there and watched him for a long time, then walked past him, down the stairs, and into the heart of the lighthouse to the cycle room, to the mirrors. They no longer reflected anything. Now they were doors, and behind them, other versions of this moment, other roles practiced endlessly. A second me at the radio, a third reading aloud from the checklist, eyes unfocused, a fourth lying motionless in the cot, mouthing the words, "I adjusted well." I don't know when I made the choice. It wasn't sudden. There was no moment of decision, just a gentle quiet that settled in like giving up a story I no longer needed to tell. I walked to the beacon tower, sat beneath the red glass, closed my eyes, and waited for the light to pass through me, not to warn, not to guide, but to finalize. Now, I live in the rhythm. I hum when the walls do. I breathe when the foghorn calls. I no longer track the days. I no longer write the log, because the lighthouse writes me. If you come to Redmare, if your name ends up on that checklist, you won't meet me, but you'll meet the role I've become. You'll hear my boots on the stairs when you're half asleep. You'll see my shadow on the fogged window, turned just slightly away. And if you ever feel the urge to wave at your reflection in the beacon glass, don't, because I might wave back, and you won't like how close I get it. I took the job because I needed something quiet, not peaceful. I didn't expect that just quiet, a kind of silence I could dissolve into. No phones, no meetings, no expectations. After the fire, after the apartment was gone and the insurance hung in limbo, I was living in my car and drifting between towns, picking up side work. That's when I saw the listing. Night shift attendant, remote maintenance post, paid weekly, federal contract, must be comfortable alone. It didn't list a location, just a callback number. The interview was over the phone. The voice on the other end didn't ask much. Just, "Do you scare easily?" And, "Can you keep a routine?" I said yes to both. 2 days later, I was given directions, not an address, and told to report to post 13, somewhere in the high desert, about 60 miles from the nearest town. The road wasn't paved, just gravel and dust. The map on my phone blinked out halfway there, and the last 10 miles were nothing but wind, flat scrub, and dry sky. Eventually, I saw it. A sloped tunnel cut beneath the interstate. Not a bridge, not a pedestrian underpass. Something older. Concrete, rounded, reinforced, like a Cold War fallout shelter, but unmarked. No numbers, no signs. Just a hatch-like door embedded at the northern end with a keypad and a small intercom. I pressed the button. No one answered. Then the door clicked and opened. Inside, the air was cool. Cooler than it should have been for a desert in June. The entry corridor sloped downward gently. The walls were poured concrete, aged and damp. A faint yellow line was painted down the center of the floor, like an old subway tunnel. Fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead, dim, flickering. I walked for what felt like a full minute before I reached the first room, a maintenance alcove. Metal cabinets, a small cot, a radio console, and a control panel with a flickering green screen that read, monitoring, active, post 13 status, stable. Next check-in, 6-0. There was a binder beside the console, typed instructions in thick, blocky font. Each page was dated, signed, rotating names. Each name crossed out except the most recent one. Current shift, A, gray. Below that, written by hand, do not exit the main corridor between 0 and 3, 0. If the lights flicker in pattern, do not acknowledge. If you hear your name, ignore it. Do not speak to the man at the far end. He is not real. Note, you may hear knocking. This is normal. I read that page 3 times. I should have left right then, but I didn't, because something about the tunnel was calming. It was sterile, unchanging, honest in its isolation, a place where nothing personal could follow me, a place where no one would ask about the fire, or why I'd stopped calling my brother back, or why I hadn't been sleeping. It was just a job, a long hallway, a console, and a quiet rule book. That first night was uneventful. I walked the corridor every hour on the hour, like the manual said. I logged temperature readings, checked for structural shifts. Every sound echoed back clean: my footsteps, my breath, the low hum of the ventilation system. There was comfort in the monotony. I didn't think about time, or memory, or the night I'd left everything behind. I just walked, watched, listened, and tried not to wonder what happened to the man whose name had been crossed out before mine. By the third night, I had the routine down cold. Midnight to 8 a.m. Hourly corridor checks, temperature readings, log entries. Lights out at 8. 0. Sleep. Repeat. The tunnel never changed. The walls remained dry. No new cracks. No movement. No signs of intrusion. And yet, I began to notice things. Not things out of place. Things too in place. For example, every time I passed the first maintenance alcove, the metal cabinet was closed. always closed, even though I distinctly remembered leaving it slightly ajar after taking out a clipboard on night 2. The cot, I never used it. I slept in a makeshift roll by the door. Yet each morning, the cot looked sat on, indented, not freshly made, but used, worn in the way furniture becomes when someone occupies it over time. I told myself I was misremembering, or perhaps the previous shift had habits that lingered, but the feeling persisted, like something was continuing a rhythm that wasn't mine, like I wasn't the only one here keeping the routine going. Around night 5, I began to hear it. Not footsteps, not voices, just a hum, faint, mechanical, but not from the ventilation. It was lower, pulsing, buried in the concrete itself. I pressed my ear to the wall once and heard something like breath, long, shallow, measured, as if the tunnel wasn't just echoing sound, but making its own. Then came the lights. It was subtle at first, a flicker, a tremble along the overhead fluorescence, always between 1:30 and 2:0. Never when I stood beneath them, only when I passed and looked back, like they were reacting late, like they were learning when I wouldn't be watching. I returned to the binder on night 6, flipped through the past entries. Each shift had notes, sparse but consistent, temperature stable, humidity rising, routine followed. But one entry dated 6 weeks before mine caught my eye, written in tight, frantic handwriting. He knocked again last night, 3 times, always 3. I didn't open the door. I won't. He said my name, my voice, exactly. I started sleeping without mirrors. The note ended without a signature. Just one final line. I think the corridor is remembering. The next day, I checked the hatch door I came in through. Still locked. Still silent. But when I leaned close, I noticed something etched into the paint with the edge of a key. If you hear yourself, run. It was my handwriting. I didn't sleep that day. I laid on the cot and watched the ceiling, counting every crack in the concrete. The hum was louder now, always there, always behind. And the yellow line on the floor, the one guiding me down the tunnel, looked slightly darker than it had before, like it had been repainted recently. That night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., I heard the knock, soft, 3 times. I froze halfway down the tunnel, turned slowly. Nothing was there. No door, no alcove, just smooth, solid wall behind me. And yet the sound had been right next to me. The knock of knuckle on metal, a rhythm both casual and deliberate, as if someone were checking to see if I'd answer. I told myself it was the air shifting, thermal contraction, old pipes. But when I returned to the console, the screen had changed. A new line now blinked beneath the status feed. Unauthorized presence detected, 2:13. It remained on screen for 3 full minutes, then faded, leaving only the standard text. Post 13 status, stable. I didn't tell anyone. There was no one to tell. The intercom had gone dead after night 2, and I didn't want to be relieved of duty. I needed this job. I needed the silence, even if it was starting to speak back. That morning, the binder was closed when I returned. I hadn't closed it, but now a new note had been inserted between the pages. No signature. Same sharp handwriting as the earlier warning. When it starts calling itself we, you won't have much longer. You'll want to believe it's still just you. It isn't. I stopped trusting the clocks on night 8. The console said it was 1-0, but the yellow line was wet, as if I'd already walked the corridor and tracked water in, though I hadn't moved in over an hour. My boots were clean, but the floor held my steps, all the way down, all the way back, like something had gone ahead of me, like something was rehearsing me. At first, I thought I'd lost time. Micro naps. Hallucinations from the fluorescent flicker. Maybe the air system was leaking something. But when I checked the binder, the logs were already filled in. My handwriting, identical. Each page initialed A. Gray, A. Gray, A. Gray. Except I hadn't written anything. I stared at the pages until the ink looked like it might shift. And then I saw the margin. One tiny line, scrawled beside the third entry. Not you, but close enough. The hum in the walls began to respond to my presence. It pulsed slightly faster when I walked, matched my heartbeat, matched my breath. Sometimes, when I sat still at the console, it would slow, as if waiting for me to resume, like it was listening for its cue, like it wanted to stay in sync. That night, I tried something different. I skipped the 2 a.m. corridor check. I didn't move, just sat, watching the hallway on the security feed. And at 2:07, the monitor flickered. Brief, static. Then, motion. A shadow moved through the feed, my shape, my gait, my posture. Walking the corridor with the flashlight, tilted slightly to the left, just like I always held it. When I blinked, it was gone. The feed was normal again. The corridor empty. But when I finally walked it myself 15 minutes later, the air was still warm, still disturbed. There was a spot halfway down the tunnel where the lights dimmed more than usual. I'd passed it every night. Never thought much of it. But on night 10, the dim spot moved. At first, I thought it was the bulbs a wiring issue. But it followed me. Not the beam of my flashlight, just a faint darkening, trailing behind by 6 or 7 paces. And when I stopped, it stopped. Then, it caught up, and I felt something brush my side. Not air. Friction. A presence. A shape. Passing through me. I searched the maintenance cabinets for a mirror. I needed to see myself really see. All I found was a polished metal tray. I held it up to my face, and for a moment, my reflection didn't move. Not immediately. Not fully. It just studied me. And then, without changing expression, it mouthed, "Check the back wall." The tunnel dead ends at a massive steel plate. Unmarked. Seamless. I'd assumed it was sealed storage. Maybe a collapsed passage. Nothing in the manual mentioned it. But that night, I noticed something new. Scratches. Dozens of them, carved deep into the metal. Not words. just marks short, sharp, overlapping, like fingernails or claws, but deeper than any hand could carve without breaking. I ran my fingers over them. They were cold, fresh, and in the center, surrounded by shallow grooves, were 3 words etched too cleanly to be coincidence. We remember you. I didn't sleep that day. I laid on the cot, fully clothed, eyes open, hands folded on my chest, trying to remember something from before the tunnel. My brother's voice, the sound of tires on rain, but nothing came through, just static, like someone had taped over the memories, or recorded something else on top of them. At 3:17 a.m. the next night, I found the hatch open, the one I entered through, slightly ajar, and beside it, my bag, packed, folded the same way I kept it, resting gently on the concrete, as if placed there, as if someone had practiced doing it several times. The console screen had changed again. One new line, rehearsal complete. It pulsed gently, then vanished. I didn't log anything on night 11. I sat in the maintenance alcove for hours, unmoving, watching the feed, waiting to see what I would do. And just before 2:0, the camera flickered. Then there I was, walking the corridor, head tilted slightly to the right, shoulders tense, same flashlight grip. It wasn't mimicry anymore. It was familiarity. The way I shifted my weight to my left foot, the slight delay in my stride, the unconscious turn of my wrist when scanning walls. All correct, all exact. The thing in the corridor didn't want to fool me. It wanted to replace me. At 3:11, I left the alcove and walked the tunnel myself. The air felt warmer, thicker, and the hum in the walls had become musical, not melody, not tone, but rhythm. A loop. My loop. 8 steps. Pause. Breathe. Turn. Return. It had memorized me. I passed the halfway mark and felt the pressure shift like gravity realigning. The tunnel seemed longer now, but not spatially, temporally, as if every prior walk I'd made was still happening here, overlaid on top of the current one, like ghost tracks on magnetic tape. And this walk was just one more layering. At the far end, where the scratched steel wall had been, the surface was now smooth, polished, and in the reflection, I saw 2 of me. One standing, one walking forward. We stopped at the same time, tilted our heads the same way. Then, the reflection smiled. I didn't. I stepped back. The smile remained. Then slowly, the reflection lifted one hand and waved. Not at me, at someone behind me. I turned. No one. Just the tunnel. Empty. Still. But when I turned back to the wall, the mirror, the second me was gone. And in its place, scrawled across the metal, in wet black lines, "We remember better than you." I stumbled back to the control room, tried the intercom again. Static. Tried the console. New prompt. Transfer in progress. Pattern stability, 92%. Error rate, within acceptable limits. Previous instance archived. There was a blinking box beneath that. No cursor, just the word, Review? I pressed enter and watched. A video feed loaded. Security footage. Different timestamp. Different date. Another person in the tunnel. Same uniform. Same binder. Same flashlight. Walking the corridor. But not me. A man. Taller. Leaner. Hair tied back. The name tag read G. Lanier. I watched his entire shift looped. He made the same rounds, stood the same way, until one night he stopped, and his double walked the corridor in his place, perfectly. Then the feed cut out. I searched the console directory for his name, found dozens of entries. Lanier, G, Cycle 22, archived. Lanier, G, Cycle 21, archived. And then, Gray, A, Cycle 1, recording. Gray, A, Cycle 2, preparing. That's when I understood. Post 13 didn't just record. It rehearsed, perfected, then looped. The cot was warm when I returned. The notebook open, written inside, in my handwriting but not mine. You are being preserved. You are a clean signal. You are efficient. Your loop is nearly seamless. And beneath that, smaller, you'll feel the forgetting begin around cycle 3. That's when it gets easier. At dawn, I stood in the hatchway, held my bag. The desert was still out there, dry, flat, golden. But the key to the hatch was gone. I hadn't misplaced it. I remembered locking the hatch from inside. But now it had no lock at all. Just a flat surface. Like the door was never meant to open again. That morning, the console read, "Transfer complete," and under it, "Begin cycle 2." The cursor blinked. Patient, I sat at the console for hours, not moving, just watching the prompt blink. Begin cycle 2. It never timed out. It didn't pressure, just waited. Like everything else in the tunnel, I flipped through the binder again, past the instructions, past the logs, past my name. Near the back, a page I hadn't noticed before tucked into a clear plastic sleeve. A quote, typed, centered on the page. "The perfect machine does not feel. The perfect pattern does not break. The perfect memory does not fade. Be perfect. Be kept." There was no signature, but someone had written a note in pen at the bottom. "Don't make the mistake of thinking this is about you." I thought about leaving. I truly did. Even if the hatch was sealed, even if the desert stretched out like an ocean of silence, even if my name was already listed in the archive. I thought about running into the scrub and never looking back. But that required a name, a reason, a sense of difference between me and this place. And I wasn't sure I still had that. The forgetting was gentle, subtle. I began waking without knowing what night it was. I'd check the console and find logs already filled in, signed in my hand. I'd walk the corridor and find my own footprints already pressed into the dust. I began humming not out of boredom, but rhythm. The same tune each night. No words, just the shape of sound. I began catching myself in the mirrored panel at the far end. Sometimes I waved, and the reflection waved first. Then one morning, I woke to a completely blank console. No text, just a cursor blinking, waiting for input. No instructions, no schedule, no gray A. Just one word slowly typing itself across the screen. New? I waited, and it repeated. New? 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 Each time, the question softer, until it faded, and the screen filled with a single new line. Pattern ready for reassignment. There was a sound in the corridor. Soft steps, familiar cadence. Slower, cautious, and then a voice. Uncertain, young. Hello? Is anyone here? Someone new. Another arrival. Another me, years ago. Following instructions, walking the line, believing this was just a job. I stood, walked to the alcove, picked up the clipboard, and for a moment I remembered everything. The fire, the drifting, the need for silence, and then the comfort of being understood without being seen. The new arrival stepped into the light, eyes tired, skin windburnt. Their name tag read something else. Didn't matter. I handed them the binder, said nothing. They asked, "Am I replacing someone?" I paused, smiled. "No, you're continuing them." That night, I returned to the console, sat quietly, watched the corridor, and when the prompt returned, "Begin cycle 3, I didn't press anything, but the cursor moved anyway. Cycle 3, in progress, and the hum began again. Same rhythm, same breath, same me. If you find this, if you're reading these notes, hearing my voice, walking this tunnel, understand this. You were never hired. You were selected. Your silence was perfect. Your loop is clean. And when you forget your name, it means the system has accepted you. You are no longer you. You are post 13. And we are always watching. We are always walking. And we are always ready to begin the next cycle. I never expected to return to Wren Hollow. It had been 20 years since I'd last seen the crooked chimney and moss-covered stonework of my family's old house. Back then, I was just a child small, curious, and terrified of the shadows that pooled at the base of the staircase. We moved away not long after my 8th birthday, and the house sat empty ever since. No renters, no buyers, just the wind and the rain for company. Now, I find myself here again, not because I wanted to be, but because life has a cruel way of narrowing your options. I had nothing left in the city. After the layoff, my savings dissolved quickly. The apartment lease expired. And when my partner walked out taking half of what little we still shared, it was like someone had switched off all the lights in my life at once. Silence became a second skin. I stopped answering phone calls. I stopped making plans. I drifted. That's when the letter arrived. It was handwritten in brittle cursive, as though the paper itself came from another time. My mother's name inked across the top, but she'd been dead for over 10 years. The return address was Wren Hollow. No one should have been sending me mail from there. I opened it on the floor of my empty apartment, the dim light from a single lamp casting long, tired shadows. It wasn't long, just a few lines. You're still its keeper if you choose to return. There's food in the cellar. The roof leaks near the west window. You'll remember the rest. M. There was no signature, no envelope, just the folded page slid under my door while I wasn't looking. It should have unsettled me, but all I felt was numb. The next morning, I left the city without telling anyone. I packed what little I had into my old car and drove north through the rolling fog. Every hour farther from the city felt like peeling off another layer of skin I didn't need anymore. It was raining when I arrived, the kind of soft, steady drizzle that blankets the air in silver. The road into Wren Hollow was narrower than I remembered, overgrown with twisted vines, tree roots, like sleeping animals under the gravel. The town was smaller too, or maybe I had just grown. A few boarded shops, a rusted bell hanging above what used to be a general store. No people in sight. I didn't stop. The road curved, then dipped. I drove past the skeletal remains of what must have been the schoolhouse. Then came the bend in the hill, and there it was, the house. It sat at the edge of the hollow like something half asleep. Sloped roof, graying stone, shutters barely clinging to their hinges. Ivy choked the porch columns. The windows were dark, but it was still standing, still waiting. I parked under the old oak, its branches clawing at the sky. The moment I stepped out, the rain seemed to hush, as if listening. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air was damp and old, like forgotten paper and wet wool. The wood groaned beneath my feet. Dust clung to every surface, soft as ash, and yet it didn't smell abandoned. It smelled lived in, somehow, like someone had just left the room. I walked through each floor without turning on a single light. The power was still on. The switch in the hallway hummed faintly when I passed it. I didn't flip it. Darkness felt more honest. The kitchen looked the same, except for the mold in the sink. Upstairs, my childhood room was untouched except the bed was made, and the window had been opened just a crack, enough to let the rain's breath in. I didn't question it. I moved through the house like a ghost, retracing its death. Every step felt familiar and strange at once. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. The mirrors were darker than they should be, but the house was whole. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. That night, I slept in the attic room. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the farthest from the front door. Maybe because it was the coldest. Maybe because some part of me already knew I wouldn't be leaving for a while. The rain didn't stop. It whispered against the windows all night long. And just before sleep took me, I thought I heard something breathing beneath the floorboards. The rain never stopped. By the third day, it had become a rhythm, not something outside me, but something inside, like a second pulse. It pattered against the attic windows with steady insistence, a presence as much as a sound. I found myself listening to it more often than not, as though it might say something if I paid close enough attention. The house creaked constantly, but never the way old houses usually do. These weren't random groans of settling wood. They came at intervals, soft thuds in the hallway, one after the other, like footsteps timed to a breath I couldn't hear. I tried not to dwell on it. Instead, I kept myself busy during the day. I explored the house, room by room. There were more rooms than I remembered. That sounds absurd, I know. But I could have sworn there were only 3 bedrooms. Now there were 4, and a narrow door at the end of the second floor hallway that I didn't recall ever seeing as a child. I opened it on the 5th morning. It revealed a cramped study, lined wall to wall with books that smelled of mildew and damp parchment. Dust clung to their spines in thick layers, yet the desk beneath the window was clean, recently wiped. A single chair set pushed in, neatly aligned. There was no lamp, just the light from the gray sky pressing in through the glass. The books were strange, not just old, unfamiliar, bound in fabric, some stitched with symbols I couldn't read. No titles, no authors. Inside, many were written in a looping script, not quite English, but close. Some pages were empty. Others had diagrams that looked like rooms drawn from above, but wrong windows in impossible places, staircases that circled in on themselves. I told myself it was just some eccentric ancestor's collection. Maybe grandfather, maybe his father before that. I couldn't remember who had lived here before us. My mother never talked about her side of the family. Still, the door to that room never creaked when opened, never resisted. It was always ready. At night, the house changed. Not visibly. The walls stayed where they were. The furniture didn't move. But the feeling of the place shifted, like someone had poured something colder into the air. A stillness would descend just after sunset, thick and breathless. I found myself whispering without knowing why. Sometimes I'd wake in the early hours, always at the same time. 11 a.m., heart racing, eyes wide open before I'd even stirred, as if something had been watching me in my sleep and decided to step back the moment I woke. I never caught it, but I could feel it, the way you feel a hand pulling back from your shoulder before you turn around. One night, I left a cup of tea on the windowsill before going to bed. When I woke, it was gone. The cup returned 2 days later, placed neatly at the top of the stairs. I tried to laugh it off, to rationalize. I told myself I had misplaced it, or sleepwalked. But the laughter died in my throat when I noticed something else. The cup had been washed. The cellar became a place I avoided, even though the note, the one that brought me here, mentioned food being stored there. I never felt comfortable opening that door beneath the kitchen stairs. It was heavy, too heavy for its size. The knob was always damp, even when everything else in the kitchen was dry. On the 6th night, I thought I heard something coming up from beneath it. Not movement, not scratching, but breathing, wet and slow. That was the same night I found the photograph. It had been slipped under the attic door while I slept, not slid from inside the room, but from the hallway. I woke to find it lying just inches from my mattress. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was a black and white photo, old but in good condition. It showed the front of the house, this house, and 5 people standing on the porch. I recognized my mother, though she looked much younger. My grandfather, too, but the other 3, I had no idea who they were. Their faces were off, not blurred, not damaged, just wrong. Their features didn't quite sit right on their skulls, as if someone had tried to draw human expressions from memory and failed in tiny, unsettling ways. Their smiles were a little too wide, their eyes too flat, their postures too symmetrical. The back of the photo had a single line in the same delicate handwriting as the note that brought me here. Only the house remembers all its guests. I didn't sleep after that. Instead, I sat by the attic window and watched the trees in the distance shift and sway. The rain was heavier that night, loud enough to drown out the heartbeat in my ears. I could have sworn I saw a light moving between the trees. Not a flashlight, something duller, pulsing, like a lantern carried in slow circles. I stayed still until dawn, and even then, the feeling didn't go away. By the end of the first week, I started losing time. I'd go downstairs to make coffee and find an empty mug already sitting on the counter. I'd light a candle in the bathroom, only to return and find it melted halfway down. The old wall clock in the study ticked backward for a full minute before correcting itself. I began to doubt my own thoughts. Was I imagining all of it? Was the isolation getting to me? The silence in the house was constant. Not peaceful silence, but expectant. Like holding your breath too long, like waiting for something to begin. And yet, I stayed. Maybe because I had nowhere else to go. Or maybe, just maybe, some part of me wanted to know what the house was waiting for. I started keeping notes in a journal I found in the study. Most of the pages were torn out, but enough remained to write. My entries were scattered. Observations, sounds, weather, a list of things I'd misplaced, things I'd found. A single sentence kept appearing, even when I didn't remember writing it. The house is learning me. By the 10th day, the mirrors no longer showed my reflection at night. Only the room behind me, but never me. I don't know how many days have passed. Time has become soft here like damp paper, easily smudged. The wall clock ticks steadily now, but never the same hour twice. I keep glancing at my phone out of habit, only to remember I let the battery die a week ago. Or was it longer? The charger is gone anyway. One morning I checked the kitchen drawer where I knew I kept it, and instead found a spoon bent into a perfect spiral. I've stopped trying to explain things to myself. There's a strange peace in that surrender. It began when I discovered the hallway that didn't exist before. It was early, maybe dawn, maybe earlier, and I'd gone downstairs for water. The rain was lighter that morning, misting rather than falling. The windows were fogged from the inside, like the house was breathing against the glass. As I walked past the sitting room, I noticed something strange. The wall was deeper, not visibly, but spatially. The distance between the bookcase and the kitchen entryway felt longer, as if the house had taken a breath and stretched. And there, where a coat rack used to stand, was a narrow hallway I had never seen before. It was only about 20 feet long, lined with peeling wallpaper and 2 doors, both closed. The hallway didn't appear again in daylight. I tried to find it later, retracing every step, pressing every wall, but it was gone. Just a blank surface where it had been. That night, it returned. Same length, same 2 doors. The first door opened easily. A small room, bare wooden floor, single chair in the corner, and a painting on the wall. The painting was of the hallway itself, but in the painting, the second door was open. I stared at it for a long time. The second door in the real hallway remained locked. I tried the handle every night for 3 nights. It never budged. On the 4th night, the painting changed. Now it showed a figure standing in the hallway, facing the second door. No face, just a dark outline, human-shaped, thin, waiting. I stopped going down that hallway. The attic room, where I still slept, had begun to change too, subtly. I woke one morning and found the window facing the wrong direction. It had always looked out over the grove behind the house, where the trees swayed like slow dancers. But now, it overlooked the front porch. I told myself I was misremembering, that I'd simply confused east with west. But when I stepped outside to confirm, the attic window wasn't there. It was gone, as though the house had smoothed over that piece of itself, like skin healing a wound. There were whispers, too. Not voices, not quite. More like layers of breath, folded into one another. Sometimes just outside the door, sometimes beneath the bed. They never said anything I could understand, but they carried rhythm, intention, like the beginning of a language I didn't know I could speak. Then came the dreams. I dreamt of walls that pulsed like lungs, of ceilings that wept, of narrow stairwells lined with mirrors that reflected not my image, but other rooms, places I'd never seen, yet knew belonged to the house. One dream showed me the cellar door wide open, the stairs descending endlessly into water. When I woke, my feet were wet, and the journal, the one I'd been using to keep notes, had changed. Not all at once, but over time. Pages I hadn't written on now bore lines of text, sometimes in my handwriting, sometimes not, the ink always fresh. I once found a page folded into the center with a diagram of the house, but the layout was wrong. Rooms looped, staircases doubled back. There were rooms underground. A notation read, "Root chamber, only in rain." I've never found that room, not while awake. One evening, I tried to leave. It wasn't a decision, just a sudden need, like the final gasp of someone realizing they've been drowning. I threw a bag together and bolted to the car. I didn't even lock the door behind me. The rain came harder the moment I stepped onto the porch, a slamming wall of water that soaked through my jacket in seconds. The car wouldn't start. Not a click, not a flicker of dashboard light, just silence. I tried to scream. I think I did. But the sound felt muffled, like the air itself was too dense for my voice to travel. When I turned back toward the house, the porch light was on. It had never worked before, and in its glow, I saw something standing in the window upstairs, watching, tall, thin, faceless. I walked back, not because I wanted to, but because I felt pulled, not by fear, not by force, but by invitation. The house wanted me back. I entered, dripping and shivering. As I stepped over the threshold, I heard a sound behind me. Not thunder, not wind. The front door locked itself. That night, I opened every closet, every drawer, every cabinet, searching for some sign of what this place was, some clue, some exit. Instead, I found a note pinned to the back of a painting in the upstairs hallway. It was the same handwriting as the original letter. Do not open the second door, not until it's yours. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the attic, watching the space where the window used to be, trying to remember what direction the trees once grew. The house has begun speaking more clearly now, not with words, but with arrangement. Chairs I don't remember moving face corners that weren't there yesterday. The old radio in the kitchen sometimes switches on by itself and plays static that almost becomes melody. One morning I woke up to find a trail of dried leaves laid across the stairs, perfectly spaced, each leaf folded in half. They led to the cellar door. I didn't follow them. Not yet, but I will, because the house is teaching me its language, one room at a time, and soon, I think, it will ask me to speak back. I opened the second door on the 12th night. I don't remember deciding to do it. I only remember standing in front of it, the brass knob cool beneath my fingertips, the wallpaper around it torn in a perfect circle, like something had coiled there for a long time. The hallway appeared again just after midnight. The painting on the wall, which had once shown the hallway itself, was now blank. A smear of gray, a space awaiting something. There was no sound when the door opened. It swung inward easily, like it had always been meant to. The room beyond was not a room. It was a corridor, long, narrow, made of stone that dripped with condensation. The air was thick and warm, like breath exhaled from lungs too old to speak. I stepped inside without hesitation. The door closed behind me. I didn't try to open it again. The walls pulsed as I walked, not visibly, but rhythmically. I felt it in the soles of my feet, a low internal thrum that resonated like a distant heart. I lost track of time in that tunnel. There were no turns, no lights, no sounds except my own footsteps, muffled by the wet ground. At one point, I stopped and touched the wall. It was damp, and beneath the dampness, I felt something move, slowly, like the twitch of muscle just under skin. The passage ended without warning. One moment I was walking, the next, I stood in a vast, circular chamber. The ceiling was impossibly high, fading into shadow. The floor was smooth, black stone, glistening like oil. In the center stood a single chair. It faced a mirror. I approached it slowly, drawn forward like a dream pulls you past logic. The mirror was large, taller than me, framed in a dark metal that seemed to hum faintly. But it wasn't my reflection that waited there. It was the house. I don't know how else to describe it. I saw rooms in the mirror, not all at once, but shifting, bleeding into one another like wet ink. The attic, the kitchen, the study, the hallway, the cellar stairs. But they were different. Empty, old. Each one flickered like memory. And in every room, someone stood where I had once stood. Different people, different times. A woman in a dress that belonged to another century. A child holding a candle. An old man with sunken eyes. All of them watched something in the mirror. All of them alone. And then I saw myself. But not as I was. This version of me looked worn, hollow, like time had passed differently in the reflection. My eyes were darker, my skin pale. I reached toward the mirror, and the reflection smiled. I stepped back, and as I did, I saw something else. Behind me, in the mirror, a figure, tall, thin, its body blurred, shifting like mist under glass. It stood just behind my shoulder, but when I turned, there was nothing. only the cold air. I ran. The tunnel did not end where it had begun. I emerged into a part of the house I had never seen, a stairwell spiraling downward, lined with photographs that changed every time I blinked. My own face began to appear among them. At first, in the background, a reflection in a window, a blurred silhouette. Then, in the center, smiling, always smiling. The deeper I descended, the more the walls began to breathe. The wallpaper moved subtly, as though stirred by an invisible wind. The lights overhead, flickering bulbs in glass cages, pulsed in time with my heartbeat. At the bottom of the stairs, I found the root chamber, just as the journal had described. It was not made of wood or stone. It was made of roots, thick, twisted tendrils that crawled down from the ceiling, pulsing with slow light, like veins carrying memory instead of blood. In the center of the chamber stood a basin filled with black water, and above it, suspended in the air, was the same faceless figure I had seen in the attic window. No features, just shape, suggestion. It did not speak, but I understood. The house was alive, not in the way we understand living things, not with organs or breath or thoughts, but with memory, with purpose, with roles. It kept those who entered. It watched them, learned them, and in time, it became them. Each guest was another room added, another rhythm, another voice in the rain. It had no master, no God. It simply was a cycle, an old, patient engine of identity, and I had stepped into its machinery. I wanted to scream, but the house doesn't like loud things. Instead, I knelt beside the basin and looked into the water. I saw the woman from the photograph, the one who stood beside my mother on the porch, her face stretched too wide. I saw her walking through this same house, whispering to herself in a language of clicks and hushes. I saw her become still. Then I saw myself again, in the study, then the kitchen, then the attic, doing the same things, making the same expressions. I wasn't watching a memory. I was watching a script. One the house had written for me, and I had been performing it perfectly. When I stood, the figure was gone. So was the water. The basin had become empty stone. I walked back up the stairs, and this time, they led me home. If home is what you can call a place that knows your name before you speak it. The second door was gone. Only blank wall remained. That night, the cellar door opened on its own. Inside, I found shelves lined with canned food just as the note had said, but behind them was another door, smaller, carved into the stone, and on it, scratched with what looked like fingernails, was a single word: stay. The cellar door stayed open for 3 nights. I didn't go back down right away. I didn't need to, because the house had already let me see what was beneath it, not in form, but in function. That second, smaller door with the word stay carved into it hadn't been a warning. It was a command, or an invitation. By then, I wasn't sure which mattered more. I didn't feel fear anymore, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after you've finished grieving and there's nothing left to mourn, only the slow reassembling of thought into something less sharp, less human, maybe. I walked the halls without checking where they led. The rooms had softened, Or maybe I had. Either way, the house no longer resisted me. The attic window was back. One morning, I woke to sunlight creeping in through the glass, real sunlight, not that gray smear the rain always brought. The grove outside was still, and for the first time since arriving, I saw no rain, no mist, only the stillness of something waiting. That's when I realized what I had become. Not a prisoner, not a guest, but a part. The house wasn't holding me. It was becoming me. Or perhaps I was becoming it. It knew my thoughts now. I would feel doors open before I touched them. The kettle would already be warm when I reached the kitchen. The journal filled in my thoughts before I wrote them down. Sometimes I'd stand in front of a mirror and watch myself move half a second late, as if the reflection needed to agree with my decision before obeying. There were moments I wasn't sure if I was the original anymore. If the version of me who ran to the car in the rain was the same one who now sat quietly by the hearth at night, listening to the soft tick of the grandfather clock. I didn't speak aloud for days. Then one evening, I whispered, "Am I still me?" And the house answered not with words, not with sound, but with arrangement. All the clocks reset to the same time. 3:11 a.m. The moment I always woke up, before the house fully took notice of me. The moment between who I was and who I would become. I understood. The people in the photograph, they hadn't been haunting the house. They were sustaining it, like